Chapter 785. Su Xiaoma was able to be promoted to an outer disciple in such a short period of time, not because of his strong aptitude, but because of his smooth and slick social skills. He was definitely born to be a spy. If it were Yi Xingqian, he would have offended all the Taishan Shengzong disciples by now. Patriarch. Li Luoqia walked into the main hall and reported, "I just received news from Xiao Mu that he has been promoted to an outer disciple." Not bad. Jun Changxiao laughed. He had already guessed this result. After all, under his own transformation, Su Xiaoma's aptitude was not inferior to the top geniuses, and he was also very smart. If he could not mix in the Taishan Shengzong, then he would not be a disciple of the sect of all times. Tell him, Jun Changxiao said. Don't always be a spy in the Taishan Shengzong. Find a way to free up time to cultivate in the sect. Yes. Right, collect more information about the Shifeng suicide tower, the sooner the better. This forbidden area that had existed for 10,000 years made Jun Changxiao very excited, and decided to find time to bring his disciples to explore it. If they could repair the damaged formation and obtain the various inheritances inside, that would be the best. The system said. The host's thinking is so simple. Understood. Li Luoqia left. Just as he left, Zhen Diyuan walked in with a broken face and said, Patriarch, are you really going to the Shifeng suicide tower? That's right. Jun Changxiao said. Zhen Diyuan said. The formation inside was created by the Array Emperor. With my current cultivation, it is as difficult as ascending to the heavens to repair it. Yesterday, he was just casually showing off, but in fact, he knew his own abilities very well. Not to mention, the Shifeng suicide tower had existed for 10,000 years, and it was not that no top formation masters had entered to try to repair it, but it was still in a damaged state. Jun Changxiao said. Don't underestimate yourself. What if you can do it? Zhen Diyuan understood that the patriarch had no choice but to go, so he said seriously, I will focus more on studying the mystical 32 formations. With his current cultivation, he could only rely on this secret manual to repair the array left behind by the Array Emperor. Jun Changxiao said, Xingyao's attainments in formations are not bad. You can find her to comprehend the Qimen 32 formations together. Who knows, she might be able to provide some ideas. Zhen Diyuan's scalp went numb when he thought of the girl, who insisted on getting to the bottom of things. However, he agreed with the patriarch's words. This woman's imagination and thoughts were very active. She was indeed very outstanding in comprehending formations. Although Shangguan Xingyao liked to ask questions, the angle of her questions was very tricky. Although the elders were troubled by her questions, when they calmed down and thought about it, they couldn't help but sigh. Why didn't they think of such a simple question? Last, in the Hall of Formations, Zhen Diyuan said seriously, This is the Mystic 32 Formations, the strongest formation manual in our sect of all times. With your current understanding of formations, you can take it and study it. The strongest formation manual in the sect? Shangguan Xingyao's eyes lit up when she heard this. Wow! After studying it for a while, she exclaimed, Elder Zhen, the formations set up here are simpler and more magical than the ones you taught me. These words made Zhen Diyuan's expression change. I'm sorry. Shangguan Xingyao also realized this and hurriedly said, I'm not doubting Elder Zhen's formations. I just feel that the Mystic 32 formations is much stronger than the ones you taught me. Zhen Diyuan broke down. I'll leave first. You can comprehend it yourself. Having met such a straightforward girl, his heart was like snowflakes fluttering in the wind. The next day, Zhen Diyuan came to the Hall of Formations again. He had just sat down when Shangguan Xingyao walked in with the Mystic 32 formations. Her eyes were filled with doubt and confusion. It's over. This girl is going to open it again. As expected, Shangguan Xingyao placed the Mystic 32 formations on the table and took out the note stuck inside. Elder Zhen, I studied it for most of the night yesterday. There are many things I don't understand. I hope you can help me clear up my doubts. How many is many? There are about 100 questions. Zhen Diyuan collapsed on the chair. Elder Zhen, Although the spirit gathering formation seems to be impeccable, why do the two lines of defense have to go through these two formations? Elder Zhen, the isolation formation has so few formations, but it can support the entire formation. What's the principle behind it? Elder Zhen. In the afternoon, Shangguan Xinyao left the Hall of Formations with a smile. Zhen Dejuan, who was sitting inside, leaned his head against the back of the chair and stared blankly at the beam above. He looked like he had nothing left to live for. In the next few days, Jiangye and the Ning brothers had a very comfortable time. Shangguan Xinyao had been studying formations recently and hadn't come to Wu-Tang class. Their ears were very peaceful. Elder Zhen. One day, Jun Changshao sat in front of Zhen Dejuan with a bowl of rice and said, "How's your research on formations going?" He didn't say anything else, because Zhen Dejuan opened his mouth and stuffed the rice into his mouth. He supported his chin with his hand and chewed mechanically. In just a few days, under Shangguan Xinyao's endless bombardment of questions, this formation expert seemed to have suffered from Alzheimer's disease. Sigh. Jun Changshao shook his head and said, "You've worked hard." Elder Zhen. At this moment, Shangguan Xinyao walked in from outside the cafeteria and said, "I've thought of a lot of things again." Zhen Dejuan stood up and ran out shouting. He was crazy. He was crazy from the questions. Although Shangguan Xinyao was scary, the questions she asked during this period of time had provided Zhen Dejuan with a lot of ideas. Even in the middle of the night, he would carefully ponder. Understood. I understand. One day, Zhen Dejuan came to the spirit gathering formation used by the disciples for cultivation. Then, according to yesterday's enlightenment, he began to modify the formation and the layout of the formation. Buzz, after everything was done, the spirit gathering formation trembled slightly, and then gathered a stronger heaven and earth attribute than before. Ha ha ha. Zhen Dejuan laughed and said, "Just a slight modification can increase the strength of the condensation of spiritual energy. I didn't think of such a simple thing." He didn't think of it, but Shangguan Xinyao thought of it. Therefore, after the modification of the middle-grade spirit gathering formation, the speed of spiritual energy increase was much faster than before. Of course, this increase was limited. However, Zhen Dejuan was able to understand Shangguan Xinyao's questions and successfully improve it. It meant that he had a new understanding of formations. "Girl, what other questions do you have? Ask them all." Zhen Dejuan sat in the formation hall in high spirits. At this moment he realized that Shangguan Xinyao, the strongest brain, could help him have a more comprehensive understanding of formations. Some things seemed simple, but they might not be easy to think of. Although Shangguan Xinyao was weaker than Zhen Dejuan in terms of formations, her mind was very active. She could often ask questions that he didn't think of, and thus benefited a lot from the subtleties and details. Half a month later, buzz! A stream of light flickered in the back mountain. A high-grade spirit gathering formation from the mystic 32 formations was formed. Jun Changshao exclaimed, "Elder Zhen's understanding of formations has probably reached the emperor level, right?" "That's right." Zhen Dejuan smiled and said, "I'm already a formation emperor now." There was no gaudy aura eruption when the formation Dao improved. It could only be seen from the high-level formations he set up. The high-grade spirit gathering formation he set up was comparable to the level of the falling star continent. Only an emperor-level formation master could set it up. Not bad, not bad. Jun Changshao smiled. Zhen Dejuan had become a formation emperor and could set up a high-grade spirit gathering formation. It would undoubtedly benefit the disciples in their cultivation. Patriarch, when will we set off for the 10-directional Fate Tower? Next month. I think if you go, it's best to bring Xinyao along. She might be able to help. Sure. Chapter 786. Jun Changshao was not in a hurry to challenge the 10-direction suicide tower. Firstly, he wanted to give Elder Zhen time to comprehend the formation. Secondly, he wanted to wait for the Drizzle Hall to provide more information. Based on the information he had obtained so far, there were only 4 words to summarize the 10-direction suicide tower: extremely dangerous. Patriarch, Li Luochio said. After the scholars suggested that the formation was damaged and the inheritance could not be obtained, no sect has entered the 10-direction suicide tower for thousands of years. There is nothing good except danger. Only a fool would go in, Jun Changshao said. Li Luoqiu was startled. She looked at the patriarch carefully and muttered in her heart, "He doesn't look like a fool. Is there any other information? For example, what exactly is inside the tower?" Jun Changshao asked. Li Luoqiu said, "The 10-direction suicide tower has a total of 10 floors. Each floor is similar to a small world. Since its creation, only one person has reached the 6th world." "It seems quite difficult," Jun Changshao said. Li Luoqiu continued, "Those who reached the 6th world were from the ancient times. As for the modern warriors, the highest they could reach was the 3rd world before they gave up. The higher the level, the higher the chance of obtaining the inheritance?" Jun Changshao asked. "Yes," Li Luoqiu said, "but it was also from the ancient times. Now that the formation inside is damaged, none of the warriors who entered and came out alive have obtained the inheritance." "What kind of inheritance is inside the tower?" This was what Jun Changshao was most concerned about. It was also what he wanted to decide if he should take the risk. Li Luoqiu said, "According to the records, the 10-direction suicide tower seals many special constitutions. Some are related to metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. There are also some related to thunder and wind. It can be said to be all-inclusive." Jun Changshao rubbed his chin and said, "This is worth a try." In terms of constitutions, he did not need it. After all, he had the body of holy flame, the strongest fire element in the Starfall continent. However, I didn't. For example, if Li Qingyang and Xiao Ziji were to obtain a powerful physique inheritance from the pagoda, their strength would definitely increase further. "I've decided," Jun Changshao said. "After the recruitment of disciples is over next month, I'll bring the disciples to challenge the Shifeng Destiny Tower." However, a new problem appeared. How could they let the world know about this dangerous forbidden area? How could they display the strength of their sect? "The news can be spread, but how can we prove it?" Jun Changshao murmured. The Shifeng Suicide Tower was similar to the Demon Valley in that it was a sealed space. The outside world had no idea what the people who entered experienced. Jun Changshao found Jin Dejuan and told him his idea. "If we can set up a projection array formation and broadcast it live, we should be able to solve the problem." Setting up a projection array formation is not a problem, but Jin Dejuan was silent for a while and said, "I'm afraid it will be a little difficult to send the images out of the Shifeng Destiny Tower. If it's difficult, we have to break through it. I'll leave this matter to you," Jun Changshao said. Understood. Jin Dejuan had one more task to do in comprehending the array formation. Although it was challenging, fortunately, he had Shengguan Xinyao as his right-hand man. It should not be a problem to figure it out. The establishment of the high-grade spirit gathering array meant that the cultivation speed of the disciples of the sect of all times had increased by a lot. Of course, Jun Changshao would not be satisfied with just this, because there were still the supreme grade and supreme grade chapters in the Mystic 32 formations. The formations inside were very significant for cultivation improvement. For example, the 5 elements vital energy formation in the supreme grade chapter. Although it was not a formation that gathered spiritual energy, it was of great help to the disciples who cultivated the 5 elements heavenly reflection technique. "Take it slow, there's no rush," Jun Changshao said. At the beginning of the month, the disciple recruitment came as scheduled. This time, Jun Changshao increased the difficulty of the assessment and chose to take the supreme grade route again. "Patriarch," Ning Zui reported, "there are a total of 2,200 new disciples. 100 are assigned to the Drizzle Hall, 500 to the Wolf Rider Hall, 40 to the Medicine Hall, and 10 to the Formation Hall." Each hall spared no effort to recruit disciples during the monthly disciple recruitment. Therefore, there was no need to make a fuss if the Wolf Rider Hall suddenly mobilized 4,000 to 5,000 people. Jun Changshao looked at the list and said, "These new disciples must be trained well, and try to adapt to the various martial arts facilities of the sect as soon as possible." With the increasing number of disciples in the sect, He had delegated many tasks. He only needed to sit in the main hall and give instructions. It was not like before when he had to personally distribute pills and martial arts manuals. Patriarch, Li Luoqiu said. Little Emo sent a message. She received a task in Taixinxingzong and will take the opportunity to return to the sect in a few days. Just in time. Jun Changshao touched his chin and said, I can also take her to the 10-direction life-ending tower. A few days later, Su Xiaoma, who went down the mountain to do a task, returned to the sect of all times. Senior brother Su, Li Fei gave him a hug and said, I was very lonely when you left. Both of them were famous for their agility. Moreover, they liked to compare notes and play football. Therefore, their relationship was very good. Get lost. Su Xiaoma shook him off and went straight to the cafeteria, saying, Junior sister Lu, quickly serve the dishes. The main task of returning to the sect this time was to make up for all the delicacies that he did not eat before. After a while, all kinds of delicacies were on the table. Su Xiaoma ate like a whirlwind, as if he had been hungry for a few days. Senior brother, Lu Wancher sat beside him and held her cheek with one hand. She said sadly, You've lost weight again. After returning to the sect, Su Xiaoma ate a big meal and went to the space-time secret realm. Then he went to the training tower. Finally, he teamed up with his fellow disciples to enter the life and death secret realm. Senior brother, how are the martial arts of Taixinxingzong? In terms of quantity, it's more than our sect of all times. However, in terms of quality, it's far inferior. Senior brother, are there many female disciples in Taixinxingzong? There are many, but in terms of appearance, they can't compare to our junior sisters in sect of all times. Senior brother, I heard that you've already become an outer disciple. Your promotion speed is quite fast. It's not that I'm bragging, but as long as the patriarch doesn't let me return, becoming a direct disciple. Oh no, becoming an elder won't be a problem. Jun Changshao, who had just walked out of the inner courtyard, heard Su Xiaoma bragging to his fellow disciples in the training field. He muttered, a spy sent out to become an elder. That's quite interesting. Little Emo, come here for a while. Yes. Su Xiaoma stood up and walked into the hall. Jun Changshao said, work hard in Taixinxingzong and strive to become an elder. Ah. Su Xiaoma was dumbfounded. Of course. Jun Changshao said, when I close the net, it'll be even better if you can become the Taixinxingzong patriarch. Su Xiaoma's mouth twitched. I was just acting cool in front of my fellow disciples out of habit. The patriarch actually believed me. Jun Changshao said, this will be very difficult, but I'll create opportunities for you. For example, when Taixinxingzong disciples go out to train and encounter danger, you can turn the tide and win the respect of your fellow disciples. You'll be valued by the higher-ups. Su Xiaoma scratched his head and said, Patriarch, if that's the case, I'm afraid I'll have to stay undercover in Taixinxingzong for a long time. It's fine. Jun Changshao said, I won't forget you. When I close the net, I hope you'll have successfully entered Taixinxingzong and become a member of the higher-ups. Yes. Su Xiaoma straightened his back and said, I won't disappoint the patriarch. Work hard. Jun Changshao walked down and patted his shoulder. Young man. On this day, Su Xiaoma's mission was upgraded from finding out about Lu Qianqian and Fang Lingyu. In the future, no matter if it was a mountain or a cliff, he would climb it with an indomitable will. When the patriarch closed the net, he stood at the top of the mountain and said seriously to the people below, I'm sorry, I'm undercover. Extra, extra. Jun Patriarch has brought his disciple to Zhongzhuang province to challenge the Shifeng suicide tower. Extra, extra. The young man's voice spread throughout all the provinces and cities. It was like a bomb falling into the water, causing huge waves. He just challenged 2 third-rate heretical sects. And now he's going to challenge the Shifeng suicide tower. Is Jun Patriarch crazy? This forbidden area has existed for tens of thousands of years. No one has challenged it for thousands of years. It's said that the foundation of the formation has been destroyed, and the various inheritances inside will no longer appear. Isn't it the same as sending his disciple to his death? If the Shifeng Suicide Tower was still supported by the formation, and had the functions it had when it was first built, it would be understandable for him to go in even if it was full of danger. After all, wealth came from danger. But now that the formation was damaged and the inheritances no longer existed, there was no need for him to take the risk. In my opinion, the sect of all times wants to urgently prove their strength, so they're doing something so thoughtless. Many sects have already gone to Zhongzhuang province after hearing this news. They probably want to see how the sect of all times will test the waters at the border of life and death. Let's go and join in the fun. Therefore, when Jun Changshao set off, all the itinerant cultivators and clans who received the news rushed over. The fastest to arrive were the cultivators from Zhongzhuang province, because they had already received news that the sect of all times was challenging the Shifeng Suicide Tower a few days ago. Jun Changshao had done this on purpose, because he needed more people to bear witness, to raise his ranking on the heroes sought list. This brat. When Mu Changhong heard this, helplessness appeared on his face. As expected, he won't feel comfortable if he doesn't seek death. That day, he hurried to Zhongzhuang province. Firstly, it was not a sect battle, so no one would say anything if he went. Secondly, his daughter went with him. There was a very long mountain range to the east of Zhongzhuang province. There were complex buildings in the center of the dense forest. Judging from the moss-covered buildings, they were clearly very old and ancient. At the end of the buildings, there was a stone tower that did not look very tall. Because no one had come to clean it, it had long been covered by vines and leaves, as if it had put on a ghillie suit, and was hidden in the wilderness. Whoosh! Whoosh! Suddenly, streams of light flew over from the forest, then landed gracefully in front of the stone tower, which was still considered spacious. Elder Gong, long time no see. A sect elder who had arrived early cupped his hands and smiled. Looking around, he found that there were already a few hundred martial artists gathered here. Judging from their auras, many of them had already reached king tier, and even emperor tier. Whoosh! The space trembled slightly, and City Lord Han of the Great Sage Royal City appeared out of thin air and landed on the grass. City Lord Han. The various sect elders all cupped their hands and greeted him. City Lord Han glanced around and said, "The sect of all times is not here yet?" "No," a martial artist said. A cultivator said, "We've already waited for a few days. Will he change his mind halfway and not show up?" "They won't," City Lord Han said. "That brat sent a letter half a month ago saying that he wants to challenge the 10-directional life-ending tower. He probably won't go back on his word." Whoosh! Suddenly, a stream of light flew over from the sky and landed in front of the stone tower very quickly. When the light dissipated, Jun Changshao smiled and cupped his hands. "City Lord Han, long time no see. I've missed you." Seeing this shameless guy who was crazily advertising in the dragon and tiger battle for hegemony, City Lord Han almost couldn't help but rush over and rub him against the grass. "Jun Patriarch, why are you alone? The disciples are all behind you." Jun Patriarch, the 10-directional life-ending tower, was set up by 10 martial emperors back then. "It's very dangerous inside. Are you sure you want to bring your disciples in?" Of course. Everyone stopped talking. There was nothing good inside, yet he still wanted to go in. This guy really didn't care about his and his disciples' lives. Not long after, Jiangye, Elder Zhen, Li Qingyang, and the other disciples all rushed over and stood in front of the patriarch. With enough understanding of the 10-directional life-ending tower, Jun Changshao was still very cautious. Not only did he bring the lineup to clear the hard mode without any injuries, but he also brought Ding Xingwang along. "Jun Patriarch," City Lord Han said, "if your sect wants to challenge the 10-directional life-ending tower, only 10 people can enter." "There's a limit to the number of people?" Jun Changshao asked. City Lord Han shook his head and said, "Not only is there a limit to the number of people, but there's also a limit to the realm and age. Martial artists who have reached the half-saint or saint level or above, as well as martial artists who are over 100 years old, can't enter." As a veteran, Wu Sheng's understanding of the 10-directional life-ending tower was definitely not something that the Drizzle Hall, which collected information, could compare to. "That's fucked up," Jun Changshao said gloomily. He originally planned to let Elder Ding hold the line and have a few emperor-level elders accompany him. Now that there was a limit to the number of people, realm, and age, only he Jiangya and his disciples met the criteria. Elder Zhen, Jun Changshao said, "Are you 100 years old?" Zhen Dejuan said, "I'm already more than 300 years old." Jun Changshao broke down and said, "Then how the fuck are we going to go in and repair the formation?" Zhen Dejuan said, "I've already sensed the formation's aura. As long as we can communicate with it, it doesn't matter whether we go in or not." That's good, that's good. Jun Changshao's hope was ignited again. However, Zhen Dejuan said, "I'm afraid that there's also a formation core inside. So Patriarch, it's best if you bring Xingyao along. This way, the three of us can work together from the inside." Jun Changshao agreed. City Lord Han said, "Jun Patriarch, the formation of the 10-directional life-ending tower has been damaged. No one can obtain the inheritance from it anymore. I don't think there's a need for your sect to go in. Since Jun has come all the way here, he won't change his mind easily. Whether it's a mountain of blades or a sea of fire in the tower, he will bring his disciples to go in," Jun Changshao said. "You're bold," City Lord Han said. Elder Zhen, Jun Changshao said, "Get ready." Yes. Zhen Dejuan walked to an open area and waved his hands. One by one, formation flags flew out and were inserted into the grass in a regular pattern. Buzz. Flowing light flashed and rushed into the clouds. Gradually, a mirror-like light screen appeared out of thin air. Projection array? City Lord Han looked at Zhen Dejuan in shock. To be able to set it up so casually, this person's understanding of formations must be very strong. City Lord. At this moment, a voice transmission came from 1,000 miles away. The projection array for the Dragon and Tiger battle for supremacy has suddenly been activated. The mirror array connecting the various states and counties has also been activated. What? Buzz. 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 Just as City Lord Han was dumbfounded, the sky above the various states and counties gradually distorted, and the mirror array hidden in the dark appeared one after another. The dozens of formation masters in the royal city were sweating profusely as they tried to repair it. However, the main formation was completely hijacked and could not be infiltrated, let alone shut it down. Didn't the Dragon and Tiger battle for supremacy just end not long ago? Why has the projection array been activated? The cultivators in the city raised their heads, their faces full of shock. Whoosh! At this moment, an image appeared on the light screen. A handsome face occupied everyone's field of vision as he shouted, "Everyone, what you see now is from the 10-directional life-ending tower of the Central Venerable State. Today, I will bring my disciples to go in before the whole world." Fuck. It's this guy again. Seeing Jun Changshao's face, all the cultivators of the continent suddenly remembered the fear they felt when they were dominated by that crazy advertisement. City Lord Han, who was standing on the grass beside the stone tower, had a wonderful expression on his face. At the same time, he realized that the invisible projection array had suddenly been activated. It must have something to do with this guy. City Lord Han. Jun Changshao transmitted his voice. "If I borrow your projection array system, I will give you 10,000 artificial spirit stones as compensation." Hearing 10,000 artificial spirit stones, City Lord Han, who originally had an ugly expression, smiled and said, "It has been thousands of years since anyone has challenged the 10-directional life-ending tower. Naturally, I have to let the world witness it. Jun Patriarch can use it as you wish." Chapter 787. City Lord Han compromised in front of the spirit stones and allowed Jun Changshao to use the projection system set up for the Dragon-Tiger battle for hegemony. Actually, there was nothing he could do even if he didn't compromise, because the formation had been hijacked by Zhen Dejuan. It would take some time for the formation masters in the Imperial City to regain control. "Everyone." Jun Changshao stood in front of the light screen and made a handsome pose. No one has entered the Shifeng suicide tower for thousands of years. Today, not only am I going to challenge it, but I am also going to challenge the 10th heaven. As soon as he said that, the martial artists of the continent rolled their eyes. This was a forbidden area set up by an ancient martial emperor. Since ancient times, the highest record was only the 6th heaven. He actually dared to say that he could challenge the 10th heaven. Wasn't he afraid that the wind would cut his tongue? Brothers, Jun Changshao waved his hand and said, "Remember to give me a thumbs up." Swoosh. After saying that, he landed on the grass below and stood in front of the ancient stone tower, covered in vines and leaves. Li Qingyang, Xiao Ziji, and the others walked up. They stood behind the patriarch, their eyes shining. Because of the limit of the number of people, Jun Changshao could only bring 9 people. Jiangya was one, Shengguan Xingyao was another, and the rest could only be chosen from the sect's most outstanding disciples. Jun Patriarch, Mu Changhong, who had just rushed over, said seriously, "You must be careful." Although his daughter was here, she wasn't on the list. This made him feel relieved, but he still didn't want the sect of all times to take the risk of entering the Shifeng suicide tower. City Lord Mu, Jun Changshao said, "Please wait for the good news." As he said that, he walked to the door of the tower that emitted a desolate aura and placed one hand on it. Wang. When he touched the cold stone door, faint ripples appeared. Then with a creak, the door opened and a cold wind blew in. "Let's go." Jun Changshao was the first to walk, followed by Jiangya, Lu Qianqian, Li Qingyang, Xiao Ziji, Yi Xingchen, Su Xiaoma, Zhou Hong, Li Fei, and Shengguan Xingyao. Although Su Xiaoma had always been undercover in Taishan Xingzong, he always used a face-changing mask, so now that he had regained his true appearance, he did not care about appearing in the projection array. In fact, Woody was originally one of the 9 spots. But he took the initiative to transmit his voice. "Patriarch, I'm also over 100 years old." He who came from another world was more than 100 years old. He was definitely more than 1,000 years old. The projection array projected the scene of Jun Changshao leading the 9 sect of all times disciples into the 10-directional life-ending tower, causing all the martial artists in the continent to clamor over each other. How daring! The array in the tower is already damaged, and there are no more inheritances. Why does he have to bring his disciples in? Needless to say, he's definitely fooling around. The sect of all times has been growing rapidly in the past 2 years. Challenging other sects can no longer satisfy them, so they can only find ways to court death and attract attention. Jun Changshao was really courting death to attract attention. Only by doing so could he increase the prestige of his sect and his ranking on the list of outstanding heroes. If not for the epic mission suppressing his realm, Jun Patriarch would definitely keep a low profile and develop his sect. Occasionally, he would sit in the small pavilion in the herb field and drink tea with Elder Wei. That's not right. Someone said, "The sect of all times has entered the tower, and we can't see anything. What's the point of activating the projection array?" Buzz. It was at this moment that the scene on the light screen that was suspended in the air suddenly changed, and a scene that seemed both real and illusory appeared, revealing Jun Changshao and the other 10 people. Patriarch. Shengguan Xingyao stood in front of the camera and said, "The projection array I set up has been connected to the outside world." "Is that so?" Jun Changshao walked forward and flicked the black hair in front of his forehead as he said, "Viewers in front of the light screen, welcome to the live broadcast of the sect of all times challenging the Shifeng suicide tower. I am the challenger and host Jun Changshao. This program will be broadcast exclusively by the sect of all times. The sect of all times is the best choice in your life." This advertisement was recited very quickly, and there wasn't even a single word wrong. All the martial artists in the continent opened their mouths. They weren't surprised by Jun Changshao's reciting skills, but by someone using a projection array to broadcast the scene inside the Shifeng suicide tower. The forbidden area that had existed for tens of thousands of years had always been sealed. What was inside? Only those who went to challenge it personally knew. This, City Lord Han's eyes widened, transmitting the scene inside the tower to the outside world, and letting all the martial artists in the continent see it with their own eyes. They had never thought of such a thing. At this moment, if the projection array had a bullet screen function, the screen would probably be filled with 666 comments. Patriarch. Zhen Dijuan tried to transmit his voice. The scene has been transmitted. Jun Changxiao replied. It can be transmitted? Zhen Dejuan was shocked. Normally, transmitting the scene outside the sealed forbidden area came from him and Shengguan Xinyao's countless attempts on the array. However, transmitting the scene in real time was a bit strange. If they used the falling star continent's sound transmission technique, it definitely wouldn't work. However, the Sect of all Times' unique sound transmission technique could ignore space and transmit sound on a deeper level. Xingyao, Jun Changxiao said, raise the light screen and show the environment inside the Shifeng suicide tower from an oblique angle. Yes. Shengguan Xingyao controlled the array and gradually rose into the air, looking down at the tower from the best angle. The martial artists outside saw the interior clearly through the lens. It was an area that seemed both real and fake. It felt like a dream. Is this the Shifeng suicide tower? Although I can't feel the atmosphere, judging from the flashing 7-colored streamers around it, it must be strange and eerie. Jun Patriarch not only wants to take his disciple to try it out, but also wants to let us see it with our own eyes. This can't be better. Although they were a little disdainful of Jun Changxiao just now, many martial artists were very grateful to him now. After all, they didn't dare to try the Shifeng suicide tower in their lifetime. Now that they could watch it with the help of the light screen, it was undoubtedly an honor. City Lord Han said to himself, no wonder this kid came into contact with the array. He had already thought about it and wanted to use this method to try the Shifeng suicide tower in front of everyone. Master, Elder Zhou, who was in the heavenly mandate imperial city, looked at the scene displayed by the projection array and said, Jun Patriarch is playing a little crazy. Yi Tianqing said, to try the Shifeng suicide tower in front of so many people. He is definitely the first person in history. If he succeeds, the Sect of all Times will definitely leave a mark in history. When he said the last sentence, he was a little emotional. His hands began to tremble slightly. Elder Zhou and Elder Jin saw this and said to themselves, should we prepare elixirs and a bed in advance? Father. In the Shengguan family, Shengguan Xinyao's father said in surprise, it's Xingyao. She followed Jun Patriarch into the Shifeng suicide tower. I'm not blind, Shengguan Hong said angrily. Not only was he not blind, but he also understood from his granddaughter's words that the projection array used to transmit to the outside world must have been set up by her. Child, you made the right decision back then, Shengguan Hong said. Only in the Sect of all Times can you show your talent. In the beginning, before the Sect of all Times rose against the trend, Shengguan Xingyao had already noticed. She used her grandfather to test Jun Changxiao's understanding of martial arts. In the end, she joined the Sect of all Times despite her family's objections. Although Shengguan Hong supported her at that time, he was a little apprehensive. He was worried that a low-level sect would not be able to help her much. When the Sect of all Times rose and counterattacked, he realized how sharp his granddaughter's vision was. Clap. In the light screen, Jun Changxiao clapped his hands and said proudly, this is a forbidden area set up by the martial emperor 10,000 years ago. The Sect of all Times is going to try it today. Jiang Ye, Li Qingyang, and the others who were standing at the back started to warm up before the battle. Even Lu Qianqian had a serious look on her face. However, only Yi Xingchen was still standing there with his arms crossed and a proud expression on his face. I just took over a young body and easily sneaked in. The forbidden area set up by the 10 martial emperors in ancient times is nothing more than this. Chapter 788. The first level of the 10-direction suicide tower was displayed on the light screen, hanging above the cities of the falling star continent, allowing all the martial artists to see it with their own eyes. Jun Changxiao and his disciples were also prepared to challenge the tower. But not long after, the space suddenly began to distort slightly. Immediately, the originally illusory area suddenly transformed into an environment with beautiful mountains and clear waters, as if it was a paradise. The first world, City Lord Han exclaimed. He had some understanding of the inside of the 10-direction suicide tower from ancient books, but he had only imagined it through words. Now that he could see it in real time through the light screen, he realized that it was very different from what he had imagined. What a beautiful scenery! Is this real or just an illusion? I heard that the 10 worlds in the tower were created by the 10 martial emperors. They are both real and fake. While everyone was discussing, a deep and desolate voice came from the light screen. I am the martial emperor of the Great Wilderness. I created the Great Wilderness world here. If the juniors pass, they will have a chance to temper their muscles and bones. Those who are fated will even receive the inheritance of the Great Wilderness physique. The martial emperor of the Great Wilderness. The entire continent was in an uproar. Although many people knew little about the ancient times, they had heard that during the War of Emperors, the martial emperor had fought against several top martial emperors with his terrifying physique. The martial emperor of the Great Wilderness was so powerful because he had the Great Wilderness physique. It was a top-notch defensive physique, even more powerful than the invincible Vajra physique. It was said that if one comprehended it to the extreme, he could create a great wilderness world in his body. As long as the world did not shatter, his body would not collapse. During the War of Emperors 10,000 years ago, the martial emperor of the Great Wilderness had fought against several martial emperors. He had even used the Great Wilderness world to suppress 2 martial emperors. As a result, a corner of the continent had collapsed and drifted toward the sea in the east. That was the origin of the Eastern Sea Fishery Province. Although the martial emperor of the Great Wilderness had fallen in the War of Emperors, his powerful physique was known as the most resistant among the martial emperors. The Great Wilderness physique? Xiao Ziji's eyes lit up. As a physique cultivator, he naturally hoped to obtain this physique that could help improve his physique. Jun Changxiao said, Zueji, this physique is yours. Everyone's lips twitched. Big brother. The array was destroyed long ago. The various inheritances inside were all gone. Even if you break through, you won't be able to get it. They had been paying attention to Jun Changxiao, Li Qingyang, and the others, but they had overlooked Shengguan Xinyao, who had disappeared from view. This girl had already begun to communicate with Zhen Dijuan, working together to study the array formation. Elder Zhen, the formation inside is very chaotic. I can't penetrate it for the time being. Don't rush. Take your time. In the outside world, Zhen Dijuan was also trying his best to infiltrate, but after all, his level was too high, and it was not easy to succeed. Suddenly, a strange aura visible to the naked eye surged out from the grand desolation. After that, it swept over like a wave as a heavy voice sounded out. This world contains the might of the grand desolation. All cultivators who enter will have to endure it. Only by forcefully enduring for 2 hours will one be qualified to enter the second world. When Jun Changxiao and the others sensed the primordial aura, smiles appeared on their faces. This kind of aura that permeated his entire body was very similar to the aura from the first floor of the training tower. To be exact, the so-called might of the Great Desolate was the suppression of gravity. Patriarch, Xiao Ziji sent a sound transmission. This is a little simple. Although the might of the Great Desolation was stronger than the gravity of the training tower, he, Li Qingyang, and the others had long been able to walk through it as if they were flying. Even if they were to face a higher gravity, they would still be able to handle it with ease. The might of the Great Desolation continued to surge in, and the intensity gradually increased until it finally settled down. The system said, 20 times the gravity. Jun Changxiao muttered, it is indeed quite simple. The gravity in the training tower was 10 times, and he and his disciples could pass through it easily. Now that the gravity was 20 times, although their bodies were slightly heavy, it was only because they were not used to it. Forcefully enduring for 2 hours was not a problem. Patriarch, junior brother Yi is in trouble, Li Qingyang said. Jun Changxiao turned his head, and saw that although Yi Xingqian was standing in place, his body was slightly bent. His fists were tightly clenched, and beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. What was going on? Among the sect disciples, Yi Xingqian and Xiao Ziji were the most outstanding in terms of adapting to the gravity. Now that they had just endured 20 times the gravity, they were already sweating. Their bodies must be weak. It was not weak. It was 20 times the gravity that Jun Changxiao and the others had to endure. The gravity that Yi Aojiao endured was 50-60, until it stopped at 100 times. Damn it! Enduring 10 times the gravity of the training tower's first level. Yi Xingchen struggled to hold on as he thought to himself, why do they look so relaxed? What's going on? Jun Changshao asked telepathically. They can't even endure 20 times the gravity. 20 times? Yi Xingchen gritted his teeth and said with difficulty. This is abnormal if it's less than 100 times. 100 times? Surprise appeared on Jun Changshao's face. He hurriedly asked Li Qingyang and the others, and the conclusion was that they were all 20 times the gravity. Why was it only 100 times the gravity? The system said. Could it be because he came from the upper realm, and his age does not meet the standards, so the pressure he endured is different from the host and the others? Jun Changshao came to a realization and asked telepathically, were you more than 100 years old in your previous life? Although the two sides had not formally discussed it, some things were already known from the palm print from the sky during the battle of dragons and tigers. Yi Xingchen heard the patriarch's words and thought to himself, could it be because of this that the pressure I endure is so much stronger than the others? Yes. Lord Knight Emperor. Although you used a bug to enter the Fatality Tower, the formation that can still be maintained has already analyzed your actual age from the soul level, so it gives you the highest standard treatment. Damn it! Yi Xingchen also confirmed the reason why the pressure he endured was higher than the others, and thought to himself, I still underestimated the ancient Emperor Wu. Huff huff. As he spoke, the 100-fold pressure continued to ravage his body, causing his face to become even more distorted and his body to bend even more. He had already built a good foundation in the Tower of Experience. Otherwise, he would have already collapsed to the ground, his bones crushed under the pressure of the Great Desolation. Can you hold on? Jun Changshao asked worriedly. He was also very depressed now. If he had known this would happen, he would have let 7 fields take his place. Yes, Yi Xingchen said with difficulty as he endured the 100-fold pressure. Although the pressure he endured was higher than the others, as a former Emperor Wu, he had a pride that would never admit defeat. Even the space is folding. What is the desolation's power? Jun Patriarch and the other disciples' expressions are normal, but why does Yi Xingchen look so bad? Everyone stared intently at the screen, watching as the desolation's power exploded, causing the space to gradually distort. Unbelievable, City Lord Han said in shock. He knew from the ancient books that the first heaven and earth had a similar gravitational pressure, but out of the 10 people who entered, 9 of them had a calm expression. Time ticked by. Jun Changshao and the others were still standing straight, but Yi Xingchen's face was completely distorted after enduring the pressure for more than 10 minutes. His veins were bulging, but his back was not completely bent, and he was still gritting his teeth and enduring the pressure. When he entered, he was still looking down on the 10 ancient Emperor Wu, but now, he was enduring the pressure of the desolation that was stronger than the others. He felt that he deserved to be slapped in the face. Junior brother Yi, hold on. Junior brother Yi, hold on. Li Qingyang and Su Xiaoma cheered for him. Yi Xingchen. Chapter 789. Out of the 10 people who entered the vast wilderness, 9 were very calm. Only Knight Emperor was the saddest. The martial artists outside could clearly see his ferocious expression and the sweat on his forehead through the camera. That's not right. Isn't this guy very strong? Everyone else is fine. So why is he in the most pain? A martial artist said. If this person collapses, will it be considered a failure or a total failure? I heard that the challengers who enter in a team will only be considered a failure if all of them fail. Then they will be directly obliterated. If that's the case, it doesn't matter if that guy fails or not. As long as the others can enter, they can also lie down and enter the second world. Fortunately, Knight Emperor didn't hear it. Otherwise, he would definitely fly into a rage. After all, with his proud personality, he definitely couldn't accept the label of lying down and winning. Junior brother Yi, hang in there. Li Qingyang and the others were still cheering for Yi Xingchen. However, he endured the 100-fold pressure and tried his best to stabilize his body and not give in. If the martial artists outside knew that this sect of all time's disciple endured 5 times the pressure of the vast wilderness and didn't collapse after more than 10 minutes, they would definitely be in awe. Huff huff. The pressure continued to spread. Every inch of Yi Xingqian's skin felt like it was on a chopping board and was being ruthlessly slapped by the blade. This feeling was indescribable. Outside the camera, Shengguan Xinyao's forehead was also gradually sweating. However, it wasn't because of the pressure, but because she had been studying the array all this time. Zhen Dejuan was the same in the outside world. Although he didn't experience the pressure of the vast wilderness, using his spiritual senses to crazily pry into the array also exhausted a lot of his mental energy. You haven't penetrated it yet? Jun Changshao asked telepathically. Zhen Dejuan said, Patriarch, this array set up by the Array Emperor is too strong. I feel like there's no hope at all. Don't give up, Jun Changshao encouraged. Zhen Dejuan didn't say anything. He knew that the infiltration was only the first step. This array from 10,000 years ago must have an extremely complicated internal structure. Even if he infiltrated it, he probably wouldn't be able to do anything. Patriarch Elder Zhen. At this moment, Shengguan Xinyao telepathically said, I've infiltrated it. So fast. Zhen Dejuan's face filled with surprise. The formation that existed outside was used to protect the entire Shifeng suicide tower, so it was very difficult to infiltrate it. Because the interior was damaged, the difficulty was relatively lower. Little girl, Zhen Dejuan asked, what's the situation inside? Shengguan Xinyao said, there are many formations and lines. There are probably more than 100,000 of them. Dejuan Zhen Dejuan's eyes widened. Shengguan Xinyao said, Elder Zhen, I'm dizzy. At this moment, she had infiltrated the interior of the array left behind by the Array Emperor in her soul form. In front of her, there were countless light spots and outlines, just like the sand of the Ganges River. As Jun Changshao endured the 20 times pressure, he was also distracted by the array formation. When he saw how densely packed the array formation was, he broke down and said, Isn't this too much? The ancient array gave him the feeling of an endless universe. The array set was like planets and meteorites, and the lines were like the Milky Way. Both of you, look around and see if there's a separate array setup. Maybe it's related to the array setup outside, Zhen Dejuan said. Jun Changshao and Shengguan Xinyao looked around in a daze. Needless to say, he had indeed found a relatively independent galaxy in the middle of the universe. Elder Zhen, there's an independent one. Can you analyze it or change the way it operates? Jun Changshao was silent. He was talented in array formation, but he relied on the aptitude elixir. Moreover, he didn't focus on studying it. It would be difficult to analyze it. Let me try, Shengguan Xinyao said. She closed her eyes and divided her spiritual sense into countless parts. Then, she shrouded the complex array in lines. Her mind was constantly deducing and creating images. If Jun Changshao could see through Shengguan Xinyao's sea of consciousness, he would definitely be amazed at how big the hole in her brain was. Even Zhen Dejuan, who had reached the level of Emperor of Array, had to admit defeat. Even when they were studying the Chiman 32 formations together, he once sighed with emotion. She's a rare woman. She was strange. She could always think of all kinds of problems from a tricky angle. An hour later, Li Qingyang, Xiao Zueji, and the others were still calmly enduring the might of the Great Desolation. Yi Xingqian had already bent his proud spine and was half squatting to support himself. The 100 times pressure was too strong. It was so strong that he was covered in sweat. His bones and skin seemed to have been tempered thousands of times. Although the process was painful, it was a good opportunity to shape his body. At least his meridians, flesh, and other aspects were well tempered in the adversity. In short, if he could endure for 2 hours in the wasteland, it would be more effective than cultivating in the training tower for a month or even longer. Shengguan Xinyao was also covered in sweat. Although her brain capacity was big and her imagination was open, it was very difficult to analyze even the tip of the iceberg of the ancient array. However, after trying her best to omit thousands of words, She finally found a slight difference after repeated deduction and self-questioning. She said, Elder Zhen, I feel that there's a formation in this area that's connected to the formation outside. If it's modified, you should be able to infiltrate it easily. Jun Changxiao suddenly became nervous. The lines in the array were strictly arranged. The slightest change could cause an explosion. Girl, are you sure? Zhen Dejuan asked. Shengguan Xinyao paused and said firmly. I'm sure. Then change it. After getting Elder Zhen's approval, Shengguan Xinyao looked at the patriarch and waited for his order. Jun Changxiao was in a dilemma. After all, the array would explode if it was touched. With so many disciples in it, they might be buried with it. The current situation was a bit similar to Shengguan Xinyao being a bomb disposal expert. She was holding a pair of scissors on a red line, waiting for the order of the higher-ups to cut it. Beep, beep. The countdown on the bomb sounded in Jun Changxiao's ears. He said decisively, Cut, change it. Kaka. As soon as his voice fell, his whole body was armed with steel. The spirit armor and the 9 scales armor were all put on. He released a strong psionic energy and formed a defensive wall, enveloping himself and his disciples. Wealth came from danger. In order to repair the array and obtain the inheritance of the tower, Jun Changxiao decided to take a gamble. Moreover, if he chose to give up at this time, it would be equivalent to questioning Shengguan Xinyao's judgment. It would hurt her heart. Let's do it, girl, Zhen Dejuan said. With the support of the patriarch and the elder, Shengguan Xinyao controlled her spiritual sense. Then, she slowly erased the original line of defense and slowly drew the outline from the 2 arrays. Although the whole process was short, Jun Changxiao's defense was fully activated. He was ready to withstand the explosion at any time. Let the storm come more fiercely. Suddenly, the interior of the array trembled slightly. The area modified by Shengguan Xinyao flickered with a weak light. Zhen Dejuan, who had been infiltrating outside, suddenly felt that the defense line was relaxed. He easily pushed the door and entered. Patriarch Elder Zhen, Shengguan Xinyao said happily. I did it. I guessed correctly. After hearing the words guess correctly, Jun Changxiao almost sat down. He collapsed in his heart and said, How can she rely on guessing for such a dangerous thing? Girl, don't be happy too early. Zhen Dejuan entered the array and looked at the dazzling layout. He said solemnly, We have to find the damaged areas as soon as possible and repair them. Only then can the array be restored to its complete state. Okay. Shengguan Xinyao calmed herself down. Then, she and Elder Zhen began to examine the extremely complicated array seriously. Entering the array was only the first step. Finding the problem and repairing it was the most important thing. This was bound to take time. Fu Yixingchen, who was still enduring the 100-fold pressure, exhaled with difficulty. His body sank a lot under the heavy pressure. Right now he was more like a weightlifter. His legs were already curled into a squatting position. Under the pressure of the heavy barbell, he couldn't stand up at all. He might even be pressed to the ground at any time. Junior brother Yi, hang in there. Li Qingyang, Su Xiaoma, and the others were still cheering him on. Yi Xingchen's heart collapsed. My body is stiff under the 100-fold pressure. My whole body is in pain. You guys are just standing there and talking. Yi Baobao felt bitter. Yi Baobao felt wronged. When the pressure reached its peak, even as a martial emperor in his past life, he couldn't resist it. Therefore, Yi Xingchen's body sank again and again. He was getting closer to squatting on the ground. He was hanging on by a thread and refused to spit it out no matter what. However, as soon as he sat down, he would completely collapse and succumb to the 100-fold pressure. Xingchen, Jun Changxiao said telepathically, We haven't even gone to the upper realm. Are we going to lose here? Yi Xingchen, who was about to squat down, heard the patriarch's words. His ferocious face was instantly filled with rage. His spine, which had already been crushed, suddenly straightened. I haven't taken my revenge yet. How can I, Yi Xingchen, fall here? He raised his head and roared. The shirt on his body suddenly burst open. Veins appeared on his solid muscles. I won't admit defeat. I won't give up. I won't win without doing anything. Yi Xingchen's eyes turned red. Under everyone's gaze, his buttocks rose bit by bit. What's going on? That guy looks very angry. Everyone was stunned. Slowly Yi Xingqian, who was about to squat on the ground in the light screen, forcibly lifted his buttocks. It was as if he was lifting a barbell that had sunk into a mountain on his shoulders with great difficulty. Amazing! Xiao Ziji's eyes flashed with admiration, although he didn't know if he could withstand the pressure of 100 times. Junior brother Yi was able to go against the flow when he was about to fall. Just this perseverance and endurance was worth learning and praising. Under the control of his monstrous rage, Yi Xingqian stimulated his body's potential to the extreme. He did not collapse. Jun Changshao said to himself, how much hatred does he have in the upper realm? Time continued to pass. Shangguan Xingyao and Zhen Dijuan had been analyzing the formation. Even after another hour, there was still no progress. Whoosh! Suddenly, the power of the great desolation that existed between heaven and earth dissipated. The desolate voice of the great desolation emperor was heard. All challengers have passed the test. You may enter the second heaven and earth. Buzz! In front of the picturesque grassland, the space trembled slightly. A staircase that led to the top appeared. He passed. Everyone exclaimed. Jun Changshao, Xiao Ziji, and the others were calm. They had long realized that there was no problem in passing the first heaven and earth. The reason why they were surprised was that Yi Xingqian did not collapse at the end. He was about to sit down, but he stood up in the end. This kid's perseverance is amazing, City Lord Han commented. Plop. When the power of the great desolation emperor disappeared, when the 100-fold gravity dissipated, Yi Xingqian finally could not support himself and sat on the ground. Then he lay down on his back, sweating profusely and breathing rapidly. He endured for 2 hours. That feeling was really uncomfortable. However, during the process of adjusting his breath, Yi Xingqian forced a proud smile and said to himself, Great Desolation Emperor, your power of the Great Desolation Emperor can't do anything to me. With the possession of a body and the cultivation of a martial king, he endured 100-fold pressure for 2 hours. He had the ability to be awesome. Stars. Jun Changshao said telepathically. Entering the second heaven and earth, you won't have to endure a test that is several times more difficult than everyone else, right? Gah. The smile on Yi Xingqian's face suddenly froze. Chapter 790. The wasteland was not difficult for Jun Changshao and the others at all. But the main point was not to pass, but the rewards after passing. If it was in the past, the challengers would get a chance to temper their bodies after passing the first heaven. Unfortunately, the array was destroyed, and the reward function was lost. As for the physique inheritance, there was even less. Therefore, this was also the reason why no one had challenged it for thousands of years. After all, there was no reward, and there was a risk of death. Only a fool would do it. As a fool, Jun Changshao said helplessly, I was born in the wrong time. If he had transmigrated to the ancient era, his realm and strength would have increased quickly. Challenging the 10-directional suicide tower could also help his disciples obtain various inheritances. The system said, the ancient era was full of spiritual energy, and the overall strength of the martial artists was also strong. If the host really transmigrated at that time, it would be 100 times harder to establish the strongest sect than it is now. That's true, Jun Changshao said. The sect of all times could grow in just a few years. Although it relied on the system and his own tireless efforts, it was also partly because of the low cultivation in the world. If he was in the ancient era, he had casually gone out to show off and offended a bunch of martial kings. Martial emperors would definitely be in trouble. Thank God for transmigrating to a relatively stable and weak era, Jun Changshao thought to himself. Patriarch, Li Qingyang said. When are we going up? Yi Xingqian broke down. Let me rest for a while. Hatred supported him to endure, but it consumed a lot of stamina and energy. At this moment, he was almost paralyzed. If he went to the second heaven, he could only lie on the ground and rely on his fellow disciples to carry him. Moreover, the patriarch's reminder made him realize that if he entered the second heaven, and even the worlds after that, Wouldn't he encounter difficulties everywhere? If he would he entered by relying on a bug, and realized that he would be specially treated, his first consideration would be to leave immediately after the challenge. Knight Emperor did not have such thoughts. Even if he knew that there was a thorny road ahead, with his arrogant personality, he would still endure it. Yi Xingchen was a stubborn donkey that would not turn back until it crashed into a wall. Rest here, Jun Changshao ordered. Since there was no time limit for entering the second world, he would definitely let his disciples conserve their energy and let Elder Zhen and Shengguan Xinyao break the formation. It's too chaotic. Elder Zhen, who had been studying the formation for over an hour, felt as if his head was about to explode as he looked at the ancient formation that was as vast as the universe. On the other hand, Shengguan Xinyao, after gradually adapting to it, began to study it meticulously. In her sea of consciousness, intricate scenes constantly evolved. However, there were too many formations and lines. It was a huge project to analyze all of them and deduce where the damage was. After another 2 hours, Jun Changshao asked, "Any progress?" "No," Zhen Dejuan said. If not for the fact that Shengguan Xinyao was still releasing the spiritual sense explorer, he would have given up long ago. This was because it would take him a lifetime to find the root of the problem with such a complicated array. "Take it slow," Jun Changshao said. Another 2 hours passed just like that. Seeing that they still did not enter the second world, many martial artists were anxious. Now the entire continent was focused on which ancient martial emperor created the second world, and what new tests there were. Of course, there were also martial artists who hoped that Jun Changshao and his disciples could persevere all the way to the end. This way, they could follow his lens and uncover the unknown mystery of the 10-direction suicide tower step by step. Swoosh. After resting for 4 hours, Yi Xingchen stood up and shook his slightly sore arm. "Patriarch, I've almost recovered." After tempering his body in the training tower all year round, as long as it was not a serious injury from martial arts, he could quickly recover on his own. Jun Changshao asked Elder Zhen and Elder Zhen again. After confirming that there was still no progress, he said, "Let's go to the second world." Swoosh. Everyone followed closely behind. "We're going up." After waiting for 4 hours, we're finally going to enter the second world. The martial artists who were a little sleepy suddenly became energetic when they saw Jun Changshao leading his disciples up the stairs one by one on the screen. Stomp. The second level of the 10-direction suicide tower was also an illusory land. When Shengguan Xinyao was setting up a new image formation, a new image appeared on the light screen of the outside world. "What will this second world be?" Jun Changshao murmured. Whoosh. At this moment, the illusory land under their feet suddenly rippled. Then clear water gradually gathered and spread to their knees. In an instant, all the martial artists on the continent saw through the screen that Jun Changshao and the others seemed to be in a lake. They were surrounded by water, which was even more watery than the author wrote. "I'm Wind Martial Emperor. I'm here to create the azure wave heaven and earth. If the juniors pass, they can get a chance to temper their body. Those who are fated can even get the inheritance of Gale body." A desolate voice sounded. "Wind Martial Emperor? That's a martial emperor from 10,000 years ago. He was known for his speed. It's said that he could travel 10,000 miles in the blink of an eye without flying. This Gale body is also one of the most powerful wind body constitutions in ancient times. I didn't expect it to be sealed in the 10-direction suicide tower." When Jun Changshao heard the voice, he was puzzled. "Wind Martial Emperor? It should be related to wind body. Why is it all water? I've placed many ferocious ancient beasts in this world. Only those who can last for 2 hours are qualified to enter the second world." Wind Martial Emperor's voice sounded again. Whether it was Desolation Martial Emperor or Wind Martial Emperor, it was obvious that they had sealed their voices in this place. As long as someone triggered it, it would be played automatically. Phew! Phew! Suddenly there was movement in the sky. Jun Changshao and the others looked up and saw a murky aura pressing down until it was 1 meter above their heads. It condensed into a mirror-like enchantment. "Patriarch," Li Qingyang said, "this might be to stop us from jumping up." "Sinful self," Try punching it. Yes. Xiao Ziji raised his fist and punched the enchantment. However, it was like punching cotton when it hit the enchantment. There was no sound at all. Gurgle. Gurgle. At this moment, the water surface in the distance suddenly rolled, as if it was boiling. Then countless black shadows appeared. They were ferocious beasts that looked like piranhas. They looked very scary. Demonic man-eating fish. I didn't expect there to be ancient beasts that have been extinct for thousands of years in the 10-direction suicide tower. Ka, ka, ka. Tens of thousands of demonic man-eating fish gritted their teeth and emerged from the water surface with red eyes. They locked on to the humans in front of them and charged at them like arrows. Jun Changshao waved his hand and said, "Kill them all." Phew, phew. The disciples unleashed their cultivation and performed self-slash, which consumed the least energy. They were ready to kill the fish. However, as soon as the streams of light flew out from their palms, they were sucked into the enchantment above. Patriarch. Li Qingyang was shocked. The energy has been absorbed. Chapter 791. The barrier above their heads could not only absorb the energy that burst out, but it could also absorb and release the psionic energy around them. From the screen, the martial artists could see that the attributes and aura around the sect of all time's disciples were flying up crazily and merging into the barrier without looking back. Damn it! Jun Changshao cursed under his breath. Run! Since they could not release their psionic energy to attack the target, nor could they release their psionic energy openly, the only thing they could do was to run away. Swoosh! Jun Patriarch took the lead and ran toward the safe zone with his long legs. The others immediately followed behind him. There was a materialized barrier above them, so they could only run. They could not jump, and they could not fly. However, after running a few steps, everyone suddenly understood why the water was above their knees. It was because running would slow them down greatly. What a scam! Jun Changshao cursed. The system said, "Host, have you noticed that the first and second levels of the life-ending tower are very similar to the training tower?" Jun Changshao, who was running for his life, heard the system's words and said in realization, "The first level withstands gravity, and the second level stimulates speed when being chased by dire beasts. It's really very similar." The difference between the Jade Waves Heaven and Earth and the second level of the training tower was that there was still the obstruction of water and the suppression of the barrier. In terms of difficulty, it was much higher. At this moment, Yi Xingqian's roar came from behind them. Everyone looked back and saw that guy running wildly with a collapsed expression. He seemed to be using a lot of strength, but it was as if he was running in slow motion. He was running on the spot. Jun Changshao immediately realized that this guy was being treated specially again. He broke down and said, "If I knew this would happen, I wouldn't have brought him in." Shengguan Xinyao was also running slowly. After all, she did not have any talent in speed. She also had to divide her attention to understand the formation, so she could not take care of it. "Little Mo Li Fei," Jun Changshao said calmly in the face of danger, "see if you can attract these dire beasts." Yes. Su Xiaoma and Li Fei turned around and quickly approached Yi Xingqian and Shengguan Xinyao under the resistance of the current. Then, one stuck out his tongue, and the other picked his nose, mocking the ogre fish that were charging at them. Needless to say, seeing the two humans being so arrogant, the school of fish was instantly enraged. They all gathered together and attacked with bloodshot eyes. Go! Su Xiaoma and Li Fei splashed through the water and ran to the left and right. The school of fish quickly split into two groups and chased after them. Thus, the crisis was temporarily averted. Yi Xingqian heaved a sigh of relief, but in his heart, he was roaring. This is too much. To be exact, I'm not bullying anyone, I'm bullying you. In the second world, the knee-deep water also contains some kind of power that hindered Jun Changshao and the others from running. Yi Xingqian's resistance was 5 times that of theirs. The potential that was stimulated by hatred could last for a while in the grand desolate world, but it was completely over in the Jade Waves world. Fortunately, the school of ogre fish had emotions. After being successfully provoked by Su Xiaoma and Li Fei, They didn't have the mind to target others, and just chased after them. The Night Tharch could tell as well. He shouldn't have come in, shouldn't have challenged the 10 Direction suicide tower. Because he was completely targeted. It couldn't be helped. Who asked his soul to be older than others? As long as the formation could still operate, no matter what world, he would have to accept a higher test than others. Rather than saying that Jun Changshao brought his disciples to challenge the 10 Directions suicide tower this time, it was better to say that they came to see how Night Emperor was tortured, especially when it was being broadcasted live across the entire continent. Yi Xingqian is too weak. The others ran very fast, only he was running in place. If not for the 2 disciples of the sect of all times attracting the school of fish, he would have been eaten until only bones were left. In my opinion, he's completely a burden. The martial artists who didn't know the situation were greatly disappointed by Yi Xingqian's performance. Those female fans who were deeply infatuated with him at the Dragon Tiger battle for supremacy were all shouting that they had turned from fans to haters. Xingqian, Jun Changshao transmitted his voice. Past this level, you can leave. It was definitely for Yi Xingqian's good. After all, it was only the second world, and there were still 8 more. It wasn't a good idea to be targeted like this. I won't retreat. Yi Xingqian clenched his fist and said. In his dictionary, there was no retreat halfway. Even if there was a mountain of blades and a sea of fire in front of him, even if it was an endless abyss, he would charge forward. Me, Yi Xingqian, even if he died here, he would never retreat. All right, Jun Changshao said. I respect your choice, but you have to be prepared for all the consequences of your choice. Swoosh, swoosh. Su Xiaoma and Li Fei moved at full speed. Although the water flow had greatly reduced their speed, they had been tempering their speed on the second floor of the Experience Tower all year round. So it wasn't a problem to keep a group of man-eating demon fish at bay. In order to prevent them from disturbing the Patriarch and his fellow disciples, the 2 of them deliberately slowed down their pace, and then used words and various actions to provoke them. They always maintained an absolute hatred value, and maintained a distance that could be caught at any time. Xiniao, Jun Changshao said. Focus on analyzing the array. Shangguan Xiniao stood in the water, and began to concentrate on studying the complex array, forgetting about time and everything else. After an unknown period of time, when she came back to her senses from the images, the knee-deep water had already disappeared. Su Xiaoma and Li Fei, the 2 senior brothers, sat on the ground, gasping for breath. Obviously, they had passed. Elder Zhen, Shangguan Xiniao transmitted her voice. I found a lot of problems. This girl had the strongest brain, and could discover details that others couldn't. However, in terms of professionalism, she definitely couldn't be compared to a top array master. Tell me, I'll help you analyze, Zhen Dijuan said. Shangguan Xiniao told him all the strange problems she had encountered in the spying array formation. If it was in the past, Zhen Dijuan would definitely have a headache. Now not only did he listen carefully, he also analyzed it very carefully. I see. After receiving the guidance, Shangguan Xiniao felt as if the clouds and mist had cleared to see the blue sky, so she transmitted her voice. Patriarch, I seem to have found a little pattern. Is that so? Jun Changshao said happily. Continue to study. From the previous 2 worlds, other than Yi Xingqian, who was targeted by a special needle, he and the other disciples had an easier time. Therefore, the most important thing was to study the array and restore the reward system. Rest here. Because there was no time limit, Jun Changshao decided to rest in the second world for the night and go to the third world tomorrow. Everyone. He walked in front of the camera and smiled. My sect of all times has broken through 2 worlds in a row. Let's end it here. Tomorrow, we will continue to broadcast the third world live. Remember to come early to watch. Close it. Okay. Zhen Dijuan received the order and cut off the isolation array connected to the interior. The light curtain of the entire continent suddenly became dark, but it wasn't hidden in the dark. It was still suspended in midair. As for the array masters in the Great Sage Imperial City, they had already received the order from the city lord. At this moment, they were sitting in the restaurant drinking and chatting, not caring about the hijacked array. Let's go, let's go. Come back tomorrow to watch the battle. Many martial artists looked away and busied themselves with their own things. However, they would definitely talk about the 10-direction suicide tower, as well as Martial Emperor Grand Desolation and Martial Emperor Chengfeng. They were especially grateful to Jun Changshao for letting them see the scene inside and hear the voices left by the top experts 10,000 years ago. Outside the tower, Zhen Dejuan and Shengguan Xingyao were still working overtime to study the ancient and complicated array. As for Jun Changshao, he was wondering if the third world of the 10-direction suicide tower was similar to the third floor of the Tower of Trials. If it's the same, it's definitely not a coincidence. There must be some connection between the two. Chapter 792. The next day, Zhen Dejuan connected to the array in the tower again. The image of Jun Changshao and his disciple warming up in the second world was displayed by the mirror projection array in the city. Let's go! After warming up, he gave the order, and everyone walked up the stairs in front of him. Buzz! As usual, after entering the new world, Shengguan Xingyao set up the projection array again and contacted the outside world to send the latest images. Which ancient martial emperor will be in this third world? All the martial artists in the continent were looking forward to it. Buzz! The scene changed and gradually turned into a battlefield under the dusk. The ground was red as if it was stained with blood. There were many weapons and armor scattered around, and a murderous aura filled the air. Jun Changshao and his disciples could vaguely hear the war drums and horns echoing in their ears. Judging from the shape of these weapons and equipment, they're obviously from the ancient era. Could it be a battlefield from the War of Emperors? All the martial artists were discussing. Suddenly a loud voice was heard. I'm Martial Emperor Ling Ju. I'm here to create a killing zone. If the juniors pass, you'll get a chance to refine your spiritual energy. Those who are fated will even get a spiritual pulse physique. Spiritual pulse physique. City Lord Han was shocked. This physique was one of the most powerful physiques in the ancient era. It could quickly absorb and refine heaven and earth attributes, and raise one's cultivation level dozens of times faster than others. Good stuff. Yi Xingqian's eyes lit up. The Great Desolation fleshly body and the Tempest fleshly body were nothing to him. However, the Spirit Meridian fleshly body caught his eye. With this fleshly body, his cultivation speed would be the same as consuming high-effect qi condensation pills and absorbing natural spirit stones. Most importantly, as long as he absorbed the attributes into his dantian, the spiritual energy he condensed would be the purest. The Great Desolation physique and Raging Wind physique were only used to increase his defense and speed. The Spiritual Pulse physique was used to increase his cultivation level and spiritual energy strength rapidly. Yi Xingqian was eager to return to his peak and become stronger, so that he could seek revenge on that woman. Naturally, he wanted to get it. Jun Changshao did not care about the physique. Instead, he was thinking, I'll get a chance to refine my spiritual energy after I pass? Isn't this very similar to the third floor of the training tower? The system said, it seems that every world in the 10-directional life-ending tower corresponds to the level of the Tower of Experience. But Jun Changshao was puzzled. The Tower of Trials only has a total of 9 levels, but there are 10 worlds here. Ka ka ka. Ka 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 ka. Suddenly, on the twilight battlefield, the equipment fragments that were originally scattered all over the place flew up on their own and assembled into complete sets of armor. What was even stranger was, the insides of these armors were empty, but there seemed to be an invisible body supporting them. If an ordinary person were to be in it, their first reaction would be to think that they had seen a ghost. However, Jun Changshao and his disciples could tell that there must be some kind of power controlling the armor. This is the 3,000 armors that I've condensed. You'll only be qualified to enter the fourth heaven if you can hold on for 2 hours. Martial Emperor Ling Ju's voice echoed. Buzz! Buzz! As soon as he finished speaking, 2 red lights flashed in the helmet of the 3,000-man armor, like the eyes of a ferocious beast. Whoosh! 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 Broken swords, sabers, and other weapons flew over, and were grasped by the gauntlet. Ka. The 3,000-man armor charged over with weapons. Vaguely, the sound of drums and horns in their ears became louder, as if two opposing armies were about to launch a decisive battle. Kill, Jun Changshao said coldly. Swoosh, swoosh. Li Qingyang and the others unleashed their cultivation base, either wielding weapons or fighting barehanded. As there was no second heaven and earth barrier to suppress them, their spiritual energy was not absorbed. Boom, boom, boom. Xiao Ziji was the first to rush over. His thick fists were like two huge hammers, sending two armors flying. He said in shock, "Patriarch, my spiritual energy is depleting very quickly." Me too. Su Xiaoma felt that his spiritual energy was depleting several times faster than usual when he tried to move to the side with his body movement technique. Jun Changshao rushed to an armor, gathered his spiritual energy and punched it. He immediately realized it and said to the group telepathically, "This place is similar to the third floor of the training tower. You must control your spiritual energy consumption when you fight. Don't act recklessly, or you'll end up exhausted." Yes. After receiving the order, the disciples immediately became cautious and did not dare to burst out too recklessly. At this time, the effect of self-slash was revealed. The higher the level of this skill, the more powerful it would be, and the lower the consumption would be. Even in the killing world, where the consumption was several times higher, it would not be affected too much. Boom! Yi Xingchen sent the armor close to him flying. His expression immediately became interesting. He did not use any martial arts, and only relied on the purest physical strength. As a result, 1% of the spiritual energy in his body was consumed. In other words, Night Emperor would be exhausted even if he used the simplest attack 100 times. Damn it! Yi Xingchen's eyes were filled with anger. Perhaps because he thought that he was being treated specially again, he did not control his emotions and directly punched the armor that was coming at him. The spiritual energy in his body was consumed rapidly, and 10% of it was gone. Self-slash. Self-slash. In the killing world, Li Qingyang and Xiao Ziji slashed out streaks of light and bombarded the armor crazily while minimizing the consumption. Shengguan Xinyao was protected by her senior brothers and comprehended the array in peace. Boom! Boom! Explosions rang out, and the murderous aura on the battlefield became even more intense. Since they could not unleash their spiritual energy without restraint, Li Qingyang and the others did not have enough lethality. They could only push back the armor, but could not inflict heavy damage. Sword momentum graceful. At this moment Zhou Hong unsheathed his sword. An unparalleled sword aura tore out and instantly swept through dozens of armor, cutting them in half. Awesome! Li Qingyang and Xiao Ziji exclaimed. Whoosh! 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 Zhou Hong continued to perform sword moves. Countless sword auras burst out and cut the heavy armor, causing them to fall to the ground one by one. Swordsmen rarely used spiritual energy. Everything depended on their understanding of swordsmanship. Therefore, their continuous attacks consumed much less spiritual energy than Li Qingyang and the others. Jun Changshao's attack was even simpler. He rushed into the armor and started to attack. Bang! 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 In an instant, dozens of armors were shattered. With dual cores, he had more spiritual energy than others, so he did not mind using a little more. The rules of the third world were to last for 2 hours, but in just 1 hour, the 3,000 armors were all disintegrated. The stairs leading to the fourth world appeared. Plop! Yi Xingchen was the first to collapse on the ground. In the past hour, he did not attack many times, but because of the special treatment, his consumption was several times higher than others. His spiritual energy was already exhausted. Huff! Huff! Li Qingyang and Xiao Ziji also sat down and began to use their mental cultivation techniques to absorb the internal attributes and replenish their spiritual energy. Jun Changshao also consumed more than half of his spiritual energy and sat down obediently. Patriarch, Shengguan Xinyao said happily. I found the pattern again. Elder Zhen said, Patriarch, according to my calculations, if we can crack the pattern that Xinyao found, we can completely control the entire array system inside the life-ending tower. That's awesome, Jun Changshao said happily. The forbidden land that had existed for thousands of years must have been able to function because of the array. If they could completely control it, not only would they be able to break through the rest of the worlds easily, they would also be able to obtain all the legacies inside. However, Jin Dejuan said, I just have an idea. As for whether I can crack it or not, it's hard to say. If it were him alone, he would definitely say that it was hopeless. However, with Shengguan Xinyao around, they might be able to find the most incredible solution from some details that he could not think of. Chapter 793. The sect of all times has passed the third heaven and earth. If they pass the fourth heaven and earth, they will set a new record. While Jun Changshao was leading his disciples to adjust their breathing, all the martial artists in the various provinces were discussing. Since the end of the Battle of the Emperors, the highest record for a martial artist was the third heaven and earth. Judging from the first 3 levels, it doesn't seem like they pose any real threat to the sect of all times. It should be easy to break the record. The difficulty of the 10-directional suicide tower increases with each new heaven and earth. Moreover, Yi Xingqian is dragging them down. They might be wiped out at any time. That guy might be a burden, but it shouldn't be that serious, right? In the live broadcast, Yi Xingqian had been labeled as a lying win and a burden by all the martial artists. It was very helpless. It was also very tragic. In fact, Yi Xingqian had worked very hard. Although he didn't help in the second and third heaven, he didn't drag them down and was persevering. If he hadn't been given special treatment, this live broadcast of the 10-directional suicide tower would have been the best stage for him to show off. Crack. After his spiritual energy recovered, Yi Xingqian clenched his fists. Anger was burning in his heart. His fellow disciples were all easily passing the levels, but he was the only one who was in such a sorry state. He couldn't accept it. Junior brother Yi. Li Qingyang comforted him. Don't be discouraged, don't be discouraged. If there's danger, we'll face it together. Yi Xingqian, who had a stronger self-esteem than anyone else, was even angrier. However, he could only sigh and say, I won't give up. His attitude towards the sect and his fellow sect members had undergone a fundamental change after that night of dancing in front of the bonfire. However, with his proud personality, he had never faced them head-on and never acknowledged them. Shengguan Xinyao was still spying on the array and creating complicated images in her mind. All kinds of questions arose in her mind, and she asked Elder Zhen for answers. One of them was extremely skilled in array formations, while the other was very crafty when it came to considering problems. They could be considered a golden pair. However, even if he had discovered the pattern, it would still take a lot of effort to crack it. It was definitely not something that could be solved with just a few words. Otherwise, how could he be worthy of the dead array emperor? Jun Changshao was not in a hurry and ordered his disciples to rest where they were. He wasn't in a hurry, but the martial artists of the continent were. This fellow had rested inside for 3 days. Other than when the formation was closed at night and everyone dispersed, they basically did nothing the whole day. They all stared at the light screen and eagerly hoped that the other party would quickly uncover the mystery of the fourth heaven. Why aren't you attacking yet? Is the sect of all times planning to live in a third world? If I had known, I would have been busy with my own affairs instead of staring at the light screen like a fool. All the cultivators were getting impatient and grumbling. Challengers can only recuperate for 3 days after passing through a certain realm. Otherwise, they will be expelled. A heavy voice rang out in the tower and was transmitted to the sky above the falling star continent through the light screen. Jun Changshao, who had originally planned to rest here for 10 days to half a month, could only stand up and say, let's go to the fourth world. Buzz! A brand new scene appeared after Shengguan Xinyao set up the formation in the fourth world. It was a platform paved with stone slabs, and it seemed to be endless as far as the eye could see. I am the sky-breaking sword Tharch, and I am here to create the bone-refining realm. If the juniors pass, they can obtain a chance to temper their bones and flesh. Those who are fated can even obtain the sword transformation physique. Sword Arch, everyone exclaimed. An emperor-level martial artist, who proved his Tao with the sword was very rare, even in the ancient times when spirit chi was abundant. Zhou Hong, who had always been calm, heard the word sky-breaking Sword Arch, and his eyes lit up. The Sword Arch. It was definitely the level that he and all other sword cultivators yearned for. Now that he could hear the voice of an ancient Sword Arch in the tower, it was undoubtedly very encouraging. Bone refining realm? Jun Changshao murmured. It really corresponds to the 4th level of the training tower. At this moment, if he still couldn't see the connection between the 10-directional destiny tower and the training tower, his brain must have been kicked by a donkey. Boom, boom, boom. Suddenly, a rumbling sound came from above, and a heavy stone slab that stretched across the entire space pressed down. Zueji, hold on. Yes. Xiao Ziji staggered, and the earth element instantly surrounded his body. He raised his hands and caught the stone slab that was like a mountain. Crack! Crack! At the moment of contact, a strange force surged into his body, and the sound of bones breaking could be heard, causing him to grit his teeth in pain. Boom, boom! The stone slab slowly fell. Swoosh! Swoosh! Li Qingyang, Su Xiaoma, and the others hurriedly lifted their palms. However, as long as they came into contact with the stone slab, a special force would enter their bodies and destroy their bones crazily. However, under everyone's concerted efforts, the stone slab's falling speed slowed down until it was controlled to a safe distance. Xingyao, Jun Changshao said, continue to analyze the array. Okay. Shangguan Xingyao didn't get distracted and focused all her attention on comprehending the array. As a result, the scene showed that Li Qingyang and the others had explosive sounds coming from their bodies, and they were struggling to withstand the heavy stone slab, while she was safe and sound and closed her eyes to think. The gravity of the stone slab continued to increase, and the aura that was wreaking havoc on the bones in their bodies became more and more violent. Everyone held on for a while, and their faces gradually became ferocious, and the stone slab sank by about half a foot. Pa! Pa! Jun Changshao and Jiang Ye no longer watched from the sidelines. They raised their palms to support the stone slab, and when the aura that was destroying the bones spread, their expressions suddenly became interesting. Yi Xingchen didn't make a move. When he saw the painful expressions of the patriarch and his fellow disciples, he suddenly felt conflicted. If he stretched out his hand to support it, the destruction he would suffer would definitely be several times more than theirs. Boom! Suddenly, the stone slab sank by a lot, and it was only half an inch away from Shangguan Xinyao's head. Yi Xingchen knew that this woman was concentrating on studying the array. If she touched the stone slab, her mind would definitely be disturbed. Thus, his eyes were filled with determination as he raised his hand to support the stone slab. Come on. Yi Xingchen will bear all the suffering. Crack. Hoo-hoo. Ah, screams echoed in the 4th world. When the martial artists outside heard it from the light screen, they were so shocked that their hair stood on end. Crackle, crackle. Crackle, crackle. Yi Xingchen lifted the stone slab with both hands, and the sound of bones cracking could be heard. It was as if his entire body was wrapped in firecrackers, and then lit by someone. Li Qingyang and Xiao Ziji, who were beside him, heard the sound and immediately felt a chill down their spines. Although Yi Xingchen was suffering several times more bone honing than the others, with his support, the stone slab that was originally slowly falling was stabilized. It didn't affect Shangguan Xingyao, who was studying the array. An hour later, Patriarch Elder Zhen, Shangguan Xingyao said happily, I found the pattern. Maybe I can control the array. Do you want to try? Try. Jun Changshao said without hesitation. Boldly try. Phew. Shangguan Xingyao took a deep breath, and then began to erase the line of existence with her spiritual thoughts, reconnecting it with the other arrays. After the modification, it didn't cause an explosion. However, the aura erupting from the stone slab suddenly became violent. Crackle, crackle. Crackle, crackle, crackle. Jun Changshao, Li Qingyang, and the others' palms came into contact with the stone slab. The intensity and frequency of the bone explosions in their bodies became stronger, and their faces became more twisted and ferocious. No, no, Shangguan Xinyao said. It seems to be wrong. Jun Changxiao almost fainted. They didn't find the pattern, and instead increased the difficulty of the test. This was absolutely tragic. Do you want to try again? Quick, quick, Jun Changxiao said with a ferocious expression. As the difficulty increased, they couldn't hold on any longer, and the stone slab sank a little. Shangguan Xinyao had the foresight to squat down and continue to modify the lines and arrays with her spiritual thoughts. Boom! The array still didn't explode, but the difficulty increased again. The stone slab sank a little more. Jun Changxiao and the others no longer supported it with their hands. Instead, they tilted their heads and used their shoulders to support it. The expressions on their faces were more interesting than the last. I'm sorry, Shangguan Xinyao said in a panic. I made a mistake again. Can I change it back again? If I change it back again, it might cause the array to explode. Continue. Boldly try. Boldly innovate. Quickly. Quickly. Chapter 794. Patriarch. Shangguan Xinyao lay on the ground and said, Do you want to keep trying? Why was she lying on the ground? Because she tried a few more times boldly, but failed again and again. The stone slab would sink a lot every time. Jun Changxiao and the others were already squatting on the ground, their heads tilted to the side, using their shoulders to bear the stone slab. It wouldn't have mattered if there was only external pressure, but the destructive aura was still running rampant in their bodies, crackling and tormenting them. It felt like they were in hell. The most miserable was Yi Xingchen. At this moment, although he was still bearing with his shoulders, the torment from several levels had already made him roll his eyes. Fortunately, the stone slab was pressed down and blocked the impression matrix. Otherwise, the miserable and embarrassing scene would have been witnessed by all the warriors of the continent. At that time, Knight Emperor, with his strong self-esteem, would not have the face to go out in the future. It's like a mountain of stone is about to touch the ground. I'm afraid the Sect of all times won't be able to hold on. If they are eliminated in the fourth world, it will only be equal to tying the record, not breaking it. Now is not the time to be concerned about the record. Once Jun Patriarch and his disciples fail, they will be wiped out in the tower. Everyone was discussing. This is troublesome. Mu Changhong frowned. Although the image on the light screen was blocked by the stone slab, and the situation of Jun Changxiao and the others could not be seen clearly, judging from the sinking rhythm, as long as they could not bear it, they would be completely crushed into meat paste. Sigh. City Lord Han shook his head and said, This is the result of being reckless. Many warriors felt that it was a pity. After all, the Sect of all times was in the growth period, and had extraordinary potential. If the Patriarch and his outstanding disciples died here, it would be a disastrous blow. Far away in the heavenly Mandate Royal City, Yi Tianqing was already paralyzed in his chair, his hands trembling violently, and his breathing became rapid. The Sect of all times had won the Dragon Tiger battle, and had not had time to show off to others. If Jun Changxiao died in the tower, it would be unacceptable. Elder Zhou and Elder Zhen did not feed the dojo master the medicine. The two of them fixed their gazes on the screen, and cheered for the Sect of all times in their hearts. At present, just from the images displayed on the light screen, all the martial artists of the continent believed that this sect that was in the limelight was about to face a calamity. However, everyone was filled with sorrow. The disciples of the Sect of all times who had not entered the tower looked indifferent. Father, Mu Honglian said, Patriarch and my senior brothers will be fine. Mu Changhong was stunned. He looked at his daughter, then at the other disciples beside her, and saw the confidence in their eyes. Anyone could question the Sect of all times, but the disciples of this sect would never question themselves or Jun Changxiao. Boom! The voice came from the light screen again, and the stabilized stone slab sank again. It's hopeless. At this rate, we'll be in close contact with the ground after 2 more dips. Everyone shook their heads. They had hoped to reveal the secrets of the 10-directional life-ending tower step by step under Jun Changxiao's live broadcast. But in the end, they only saw the fourth heaven and earth, not even half of it. In the bone-refining world, Jun Changxiao, Jiangya, and the others were lying on the ground, but their elbows were on the ground, and their palms were still supporting the stone slab. Even if they were enduring the repeated process of their flesh and bones shattering, recovering, and shattering again, they were still holding on. It had nothing to do with dignity, it was about their lives. Girl, Zhen Dejuan hurriedly said, can you still change it? Shangguan Xinyao tried to turn her head, and saw the ferocious faces of the patriarch and her fellow disciples. She cried in her heart with extreme self-blame. Elder Zhen, I don't dare to do anything. Change it. Jun Changxiao transmitted his voice. The situation had reached the most critical moment, and he could only continue to bet on his disciple, hoping for a miracle. Shangguan Xinyao gritted her teeth, and continued to analyze the array pattern that looked like the sand of the Ganges River. Finally, she chose a route and quickly changed it. The line and the array pattern were reconnected, and the gradually sinking stone slab suddenly stopped. The aura that was wreaking havoc in the body suddenly disappeared. Shangguan Xinyao, who had already prepared to live and die with the patriarch, suddenly opened her eyes and said with wild joy, Patriarch, your disciple has controlled the fourth heaven and earth. Phew! Jun Changxiao heard this and felt relieved. Li Qingyang, Xiao Ziji, and the others' complexions gradually recovered. Then they first let go of one hand, and made sure that the stone slab was no longer sinking. Then, they lay on the ground with the word spread, and breathed heavily. Yi Xingchen not only rolled his eyes, but also foamed at the mouth. He had been trying hard to support the stone slab, so he had been suffering more than his fellow disciples. It was already very impressive that he had not fainted. This time, Night Emperor did not win by lying down. If he had not contributed a part of his strength, the stone slab would have been merged with the ground. Junior brother Yi. Li Qingyang reached out and put his hand on Yi Xingchen's shoulder. He smiled with difficulty and said, Are you okay? Yi Xingchen no longer had the strength to speak. Why aren't they moving? Could it be that the sect of all time's disciples have withstood it? The various martial artists did not see the stone slab sinking again. They looked at each other, their eyes filled with confusion and confusion. Boom, boom, boom. At this moment, the heavy stone slab suddenly rose, and a staircase that led to the next heaven and earth gradually appeared in the distance. Jun Changxiao and his disciples were lying on the ground. Although they looked a little weak, their faces were full of smiles. We passed. The sect of all times has passed the fourth heaven and earth. In an instant, the entire Starfall continent was in an uproar. Everyone was discussing and discussing. Father, Mu Changhong said proudly, our sect of all times has broken the record that has been sealed for thousands of years. Amazing, amazing, Mu Changhong said. To pass the test of the fourth heaven and earth under the adversity of being crushed into meat paste. This made him, and even City Lord Han, admire them very much. In fact, Jun Changxiao and his disciples were able to pass because Shangguan Xinyao controlled the array of the fourth heaven and earth, and closed the test in advance. This was definitely cheating. Outsiders did not know that the sect of all times used a control array to pass. Therefore, when the staircase appeared, they believed that they had broken the record and successfully passed the fourth heaven and earth. Ha ha ha. Ha 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 ha. In the certification hall, Yi Tianqing laughed loudly. He laughed so hard that he almost couldn't breathe. Quick, quick, quick. Elder Zhou urged. Give the medicine. Swish, swish. After a short rest, Jun Changxiao, Jiangya, and the others stood up one after another. It was undeniable that the flesh and bone torture just now was very terrifying. However, after tempering on the fourth floor of the training tower, the damage caused could be recovered very quickly. However, everyone stood up. Only Yi Xingchen was still lying on the ground, his face still weak. The test he endured was already several times more difficult than others. Shangguan Xinyao had tried and failed again and again, increasing the difficulty again and again. He must have been tortured very badly. If I were to go in, with such a strong patriarch and fellow disciples, I would definitely win in all kinds of ways. Yi Xingqian's performance in the dragon-tiger battle for hegemony was very strong. Why is he so weak in the 10-direction suicide tower? Could it be that his private life is messy, and he doesn't deliberately control himself, causing his body to collapse? It's really possible. Sai, such a good seedling, indulging in luxury every day. It's really a waste of God's gift. If Night Emperor heard them talking about him like this, he would definitely chase them to the East Sea with a knife. Let's rest here for more than 2 days first. Since the rule was 3 days, Jun Changshao would definitely go to the 5th heaven and earth. Patriarch, Shengguan Xinyao said. Disciple has found the pattern, and can try to control the formation of the 5th heaven and earth. Boldly try, Jun Changshao encouraged. 2 days later, after Shengguan Xinyao and Zhen Dejuan's cooperation, they finally gained initial control of the formation of the 5th heaven and earth. She said, Patriarch, the formation of the 5th heaven and earth is more complicated. Disciple can only remove the age and soul restrictions. Remove them. N. Shengguan Xinyao hurriedly changed it. Knowing that the age and soul restrictions of the 5th heaven and earth had been removed, Yi Xingqian stood up and walked towards the stairs with a glowing face. Before he went up, he turned to look at the projection of the formation. Although he didn't say anything, his cold eyes seemed to be telling the whole continent that next. Chapter 795. After much effort, Shengguan Xinyao finally found the pattern of the life-ending tower's formation. Although the results were minimal, and only the age and soul restrictions were removed, it was undoubtedly a small step for her, and a big step for the sect of all times. Let's go, Jun Changshao said. Let's go up. Under the gaze of the entire continent, everyone ascended to the 5th heaven. When the formation was set up again, a new version and a new image appeared on the screen. It was a dark area with light lingering around it. It looked like a terrifying hell. Before everyone could see it clearly, Jun Changshao stood in front of the camera and blocked the image. He said, Everyone, this is the 5th heaven. Next, the sect of all times will continue to challenge and set a new record. Every time this guy ascended to a new heaven, he would find a chance to show off in front of the camera. He was really asking for a beating. Of course. Jun Changshao leaned to the left and pointed at Yi Xingqian, who was standing proudly. He said, This heaven and earth will be shown to the world by the sect of all times disciple, Yi Xingqian, how to easily clear it. Xingqian, come and say hello to the audience in front of the TV. Yi Xingqian kept his back to the camera. He thought to himself, Isn't he embarrassed? Whoosh! Li Fei appeared out of the camera, tilted his head and smiled. Hello everyone, my name is Li Fei. I'm a male 20 years old unmarried. My looks are decent, my character is excellent, and I don't have any bad habits. I'm the daughter of a noble family. If you are interested, please. Before he could finish, he was pushed out of the camera by a big hand. Jun Changshao straightened his collar and said, All right, let's not waste any more time. Next, please look forward to the large-scale reality show that will be broadcast exclusively by the sect of all times. Our slogan is yeah. All the martial artists' mouths twitched. Since the beginning of the Battle of Dragons and Tigers, they felt that the patriarch of the sect of all times might be sick. Now they were sure that this guy was not only sick, but he was also beyond cure. Xinyao moved the camera up. Okay. Phew, the projection array slowly rose, and then looked down at the 5th heaven and earth, capturing all the disciples of the sect of all times. Of course, Yi Xingqian stood in the center of the camera. According to Jun Changshao's judgment, the test of the 5th heaven was probably related to the soul. Now that there were no restrictions, he could easily face it. The 5th level of the training pagoda was Yi Xingqian's home ground. Although the record was taken by He Wudi, the time he lasted inside was much longer than the other disciples. If the juniors pass, they will be able to obtain a chance to temper their souls. Those who are fated will even be able to obtain the inheritance of a Yuan spirit. A heavy voice sounded. Primordial spirit? Mu Changhong's eyes flashed with astonishment. Father, Mu Honglian asked, What is the primordial spirit? Mu Changheng explained. The so-called primordial spirit refers to the soul. Martial artists with this physique can use their primordial spirit to spy on everything around them. Isn't it the same as spiritual thoughts? Mu Honglian asked. Mu Changheng said. Although the effect is similar, the range of spiritual thoughts is determined by the martial artist's realm and cultivation. The primordial spirit is not limited to this. It can spy further and wider. Oh. Mu Honglian understood. Mu Changheng continued. According to ancient records, martial artists with this physique can see tens of thousands of miles in a breath and can accurately find a small leaf with a mark. So powerful? Mu Honglian was surprised. With her current martial king cultivation, she could use her spiritual thoughts to cover dozens of miles. However, it was like looking for a needle in a haystack to accurately find something just by scanning it. Of course, the function of the primordial spirit was not only to spy on the surroundings. If one comprehended it to the extreme, they could spy on deeper things in heaven and earth. Yi Xingchen was expressionless when he heard Martial Emperor Lingyi's words. He wanted to take revenge and obtain the spiritual pulse physique that could help him break through quickly. He was not interested in other physiques. Jun Changshao was more ambitious. If he did not consider his disciple, he would be happy to have all of them. After all, it was never a burden to have more skills. This heaven and earth has the power of the primordial spirit. Martial artists who enter will have to endure it. Only by enduring it for 2 hours will they be qualified to enter the 6th heaven. Whoosh! Whoosh! As soon as he finished speaking, a majestic aura spread out. It instantly invaded everyone's consciousness and brought about unbearable pain to their souls. Ah! Jun Changshao held his head and screamed in pain. His face became ferocious. As expected, the test of the 5th heaven and earth was related to the 5th floor of the training pagoda. Although they did not know who was learning from whom, one thing was certain. The soul test here was more intense and powerful. Li Qingyang, Xiao Ziji, and the others often went to the 5th floor to train. However, when faced with the soul torture here, they immediately held their heads and screamed like the patriarch. A test from the soul, City Lord Han deduced from the expressions on their faces. This kind of pain must be worse than death, right? As expected, the higher we go, the more difficult the test is. I wonder if the sect of all times can withstand it. No one knew if Jun Changshao and the others could withstand it. However, one thing was certain. Yi Xingchen was going to be a burden again. Therefore, all the martial artists in the continent looked at the main camera. In the end, they saw that guy standing proudly with his arms crossed. He did not even frown. It was as if nothing had happened. Everyone was dumbfounded. In the previous 4 heavens and earth, that guy looked like he was going to die. Why was he so calm in the 5th heaven and earth? Trash. At this moment, Yi Xingchen said calmly. His eyes were filled with arrogance and pride. Strange, this is too strange. Could it be that there was a problem with the 5th heaven, and everyone else endured it except for him? Many people guessed. What they did not know was that Yi Xingchen had indeed endured the soul corrosion. However, after all these years of cultivation, the strength of his soul had long surpassed his realm. Naturally, he did not fear any test. After knowing that the age and soul restriction had been removed, it was no wonder that Night Emperor was the first to ascend. He now had absolute confidence that he could withstand all the tests. The grievances he had suffered in the previous 4 heavens, and the dignity he had lost. This emperor will take back everything he lost in the 5th and later heavens. At this moment, Yi Xingchen stood proudly in the main camera's position. His body emitted a threatening aura. Those little fangirls who were originally disappointed in him regained the feeling of my idol is super awesome. Xingchen Xingchen. Stars and clouds scatter, sun and moon join the stars. Xingchen Xingchen. Stars and clouds scatter, sun and moon join the stars. After seeing their idol being awesome for once, many little fans who had spontaneously gathered together finally shouted the slogan that they had been waiting for a long time. Jun Changshao, Li Qingyang, and the others were still holding their heads and screaming. It was a stark contrast to Yi Xingchen's calm expression. Especially Su Xiaoma. Not only did his eyes roll back, but he also began to foam at the mouth. In the end, he simply collapsed to the ground and convulsed. He transmitted his voice. "Patriarch, my acting is not bad, right?" "It's a little exaggerated," Jun Changshao said. "Patriarch, how am I?" Xiao Ziji transmitted his voice. "It's still acceptable." It turned out that when the soul corrosion attacked, Jun Changshao had ordered his disciples to enter acting mode. They were to set the mood for Yi Xingqian and act as supporting characters for him. Chapter 796. In the era of Jun Changshao's previous life, popularity was king. Some young actors who had just debuted did not have any works. As long as they had a good appearance, they would be able to attract many fans. Since the sect of all times wanted to develop for a long time, they naturally needed to create a celebrity film. As long as people mentioned it, they would naturally think of the sect. To put it bluntly, Jun Changshao wanted to create a star, create a popular young actor who would represent the sect of all times. The more honest and inarticulate Li Qingyang and Xiao Ziji would definitely not work. The most suitable one was the unsmiling and incomparably cold Yi Xingqian. In fact, from the beginning, Jun Changshao had planned to let Night Emperor show off in front of the camera. But because of the restrictions, he was suppressed in the first 4 stages. Not only did he not attract many fans, he almost lost fans and unfollowed. Fortunately, Shangguan Xinyao's tireless efforts removed all kinds of restrictions, allowing him to show off his true colors in the 5th stage. Especially with Jun Changshao and his fellow sect members as a foil, many naive and unaffected girls were immediately deeply attracted to this man who shone like a star. At that moment, in the projection array, Night Emperor debuted in the center position. His fan club called itself Xing Fan, and its slogan was "Stars fly and clouds scatter. The sun and the moon represent the stars." Of course, Yi Xingqian was not just a popular young actor. He was also a strong person. No one could doubt that he persevered in the 5th heaven with a fever of 70 degrees and worked hard to show off. Do you haters know how hard he worked to take revenge for his blood feud? What right do you have to doubt and slander him? 2 hours later, the soul suppression in the 5th heaven dissipated. Jun Changshao and his disciples lay on the ground, breathing rapidly. Their expressions were still pained. Their acting was so realistic that they almost believed it. "Patriarch," Shangguan Xinyao transmitted her voice. "I have already grasped the basics of the 6th heaven and earth array." Currently, she could only communicate with each layer of the array inside. But she could not completely control it, let alone change the rules or repair the reward mechanism. "Rest for a day," Jun Changshao said. "Let's try the 6th world." In order to complete the act, she couldn't just yell out numbers and recite her lines. She had to show the weakness that came with going through a great deal of torture. "Boring," Lu Qianqian said. Everyone was acting, and she was the only one who stood in place. Although he had tried many times to enter the performance state, all he could do was frown. It was very difficult for this kind of cold woman, who only had one expression from beginning to end to act. So she was only suitable to stand at the side as a vase. One day later, Jun Changshao and his disciples recovered, and then headed to the 6th heaven and earth. Without a doubt, Yi Xingqian walked up first. As long as there was no soul restriction, the rest of the world was just a place for him to show off. "Patriarch." On the way, Li Qingyang asked, "What's on the 6th floor?" "This," Jun Changshao said. "You'll know when you go in." Since the 10-directional suicide tower was the same as the Tower of Trials, the disciples of the sect of all times should know. However, they had been cultivating from the 1st to the 5th floor, and no one had entered the 6th floor. It wasn't that they couldn't enter, but that there was no need for them to do so. This was because the tempering of the first 5 floors required time to stabilize, and it definitely couldn't be done in one go. Take Xiao Ziji for example. After entering the Tower of Trials, most of the time would be spent on tempering the body. If not for the Patriarch's constant emphasis on balanced development, he wouldn't have the time to temper his spirit energy and soul. As for speed-type disciples like Su Xiaoma and Li Fei, they often preferred tempering their movement techniques. Therefore, in the exploration of the Tower of Trials, the sect of all times still stopped at the 5th floor. Buzz! After ascending to the 6th heaven and earth, the projection array was set up again, and a new scene appeared on the light screen outside. It was a colorful world. Colorful light spots floated in the air, like fireflies in the night. I am the 5 elements martial emperor, and I am here to create the 5 elements heaven and earth. If the younger generation passes, they will be able to obtain a chance to temper the 5 elements, and those who are fated will be able to obtain the inheritance of the 5 elements body. 5 elements body? City Lord Han and Mu Changheng stared with their eyes wide open. This kind of physique was definitely one of the strongest physiques since ancient times. The possessor could easily control the 5 elements and become a complete cultivator of all 5 elements. 5 elements body? Jun Changshao thought. It's the most common and most awesome physique in many fantasy novels. The system said, host has the 5 elements heavenly art. If you have the 5 elements body, you will definitely be like a tiger that has grown wings. Jun Changshao's eyes immediately lit up. If he could obtain the physique of the 10-directional suicide tower, his first thought would be to let his disciples inherit it. For example, the Great Desolation body would be given to Xiao Ziji, and the Gale body would be chosen from Su Xiaoma and Li Fei. The reason why he was so straightforward was because he had the Sacred Flame body. However, if he obtained the 5 elements body, he still hoped to use it himself. If the disciple was strong, the sect would be strong. If the patriarch was strong, the sect would be even stronger. Xingyao. Jun Changshao said. Continue to study the array and strive to repair the reward function. Yes. Shengguan Xingyao nodded, but then said, Patriarch, this disciple has already analyzed the array. The reward function has a probability. Even if it is repaired, it might not be able to obtain the physique that exists within. That's simple, Jun Changshao said. Take full control of the entire array, adjust the probability to 100%, or directly take it out from inside. This, Shengguan Xingyao said, it's difficult. Only when there is difficulty will there be a challenge. I believe you can do it, Jun Changshao said. Shengguan Xingyao, who was originally a little unconfident, immediately clenched her small fists and said with a firm gaze, this disciple will definitely work hard. This world contains the power of the 5 elements, and will release the attributes of the 5 elements. The 5 elements martial emperor's heavy voice sounded. Those who enter not only have to bear it, but also have to refine it for their own use. Only those who meet the requirements are qualified to enter the 7th world. Refine it for my own use? Suddenly, a vast and majestic heaven and earth attribute filled the space, which was full of the 5 elements of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. Moreover, from the level, not only was it rich, but it was also very pure. Patriarch, Li Qingyang said in surprise. The heaven and earth attribute here is even stronger than the spirit gathering array. Jun Changshao said. What are you waiting for? Hurry up and absorb it. Swish, swish. All the disciples sat down cross-legged. It was definitely impossible to absorb the heaven and earth attribute here without the 5 elements. However, the disciples of the sect of all times who cultivated the 5 elements heaven reflection art had at least condensed 1 element, so it was not difficult to absorb it. The brown earth attribute began to be drawn over by Xiao Ziji after he circulated his mental cultivation method, and then it instantly spread all over his body, entering his body through his mouth, nose, and pores. Su Xiaoma, Li Fei, and the others were also absorbing their own attributes. Oh my God! All the disciples of the sect of all times are martial cultivators of one of the 5 elements. This is too amazing. Many people saw the energy of the 5 elements flowing into the bodies of the disciples of the sect of all times through the light screen, and their eyes were filled with shock. In the falling star continents attribute system, the most common attribute was the universal attribute. Anyone who cultivated the mental cultivation method could absorb it and condense it in their body to increase their realm and strength. Other than the universal attribute, there were the various elements of metal, wood, water, fire, earth, and so on. If one could absorb 1 element, such as the fire attribute, then one would be considered a fire cultivator. The disciples of the sect of all times in the sixth heaven and earth could absorb one element from each of the 5 elements. This would definitely stun the world. Quick, look at Yi Xingchen, someone said. Everyone looked over and saw that the guy was still standing at the center of the light screen. The elements representing the fire element, the metal element, and the earth element continued to envelop him. This guy cultivates 3 of the 5 elements. Look, the wood attribute is also flying over. He cultivates 4 of the 5 elements. Just as everyone was in shock, the water attribute was also beginning to converge on Yi Xingchen. Then, all the martial artists in the continent exclaimed in unison, "Cultivator of all 5 elements. Senior brother Yi is amazing." In the sect of all times, when the disciples saw the 5 elements converging on the light screen, their eyes were filled with intense admiration. Many of them had already started to come into contact with the 5 elements heaven reflection technique, but they were only at the stage of condensing one element. This level of condensing all 5 elements could only be used as a fantasy for now. TSK, Jun Changshao said in surprise. I didn't expect this guy to secretly cultivate all 5 elements. Chapter 797. Yi Xingchen, who had absorbed the 5 elements in the 5 elements realm, had undoubtedly become the brightest star in the entire venue. Li Qingyang, Xiao Ziji, and the others who had already cultivated multiple elements received the Patriarch's order and chose to absorb one element at a time, leaving the stage to their junior. Flowers were beautiful, but they could not be without green leaves to serve as a foil. At this moment, everyone, including Jun Changshao, was trying their best to act as a supporting character. They were all trying their best to set off Yi Xing. This was the friendship between fellow disciples who had deep feelings for each other. Stars fly and clouds scatter, the sun and the moon join the stars. The organized fans cheered excitedly when they saw their idol shining brightly on the screen. They were so emotional that they were tearing up. After going through these 2 realms, Xingchen should have absorbed a lot of fans. Jun Changshao muttered in his heart. If there's a chance to bring him out in the future, he might even earn a lot of money. Of course, he definitely could not let Yi Xingchen sing and dance. He could practice martial arts in the city's fighting arena. At the very least, he could produce a portrait, autobiography or autograph session. Jun Changshao felt a little excited at the thought of Yi Xingchen wearing sunglasses, a windbreaker, and a cold expression as he entered the venue under the protection of his bodyguards. Countless fans would hold light sticks and shout loudly. The system said, "Host, do you want to completely deviate the style of this world? In an era where entertainment is scarce, can't we create a celebrity so that other than practicing martial arts, they can have an idol to dream about?" Jun Changshao said, "Why don't you debut as the center?" The system said, "I think that once the sect of all times Patriarch's sexy portrait hits the market, it will definitely take the entire Starfall continent by storm." No, Jun Changshao said guiltily. "I'm thin-skinned." The system said, "You're so thick-skinned that you can't even die after taking a hit from the upper realm. Thin-skinned my ass. Fuck. I relied on my strength and equipment to endure it. I didn't use my face to receive it," Jun Chang said with a smile. The system mocked, "Don't deny it. You used your face to receive it, or else you wouldn't have been able to withstand it." Therefore, during the Battle of the Dragons and Tigers, how did Jun Patriarch manage to withstand the palm strike from the upper realm? Now that he thought about it, it was really worth pondering. 2 hours later, the 5 elements that existed between heaven and earth suddenly dissipated. Li Qingyang, Xiao Ziji, and the others opened their eyes, their faces full of unsatisfied expressions. The 6th heaven and earth didn't have any dangers, but it was even more difficult than the previous 5, because if one didn't cultivate one of the 5 elements, it would definitely be difficult to pass. Even in the ancient times when experts were as common as clouds, there were very few martial artists who could pass through this world. However, the disciples of the sect of all times who cultivated the 5 elements heaven reflection mantra were all able to condense one. Furthermore, the mantra was of a very high level, so passing the test was a piece of cake. Is it over just like that? It's not fun. Su Xiaoma and Li Fei mumbled. Xiniao, Jun Changxiao asked, how's the research going? Shangguan Xiniao wiped the sweat off her forehead and said, there's still no progress. Then rest for a while, don't tire yourself out. Jun Changxiao said. He didn't plan to continue to challenge the seventh heaven and earth, but let everyone recuperate on the spot and wait for the 3-day time limit before going up. Disperse. Seeing this situation, everyone knew that the sect of all times didn't plan to challenge it, so they all busied themselves with their own matters. However, on the way back, the topic of discussion never left. Why did Yi Xingchen, who originally came in lying down, suddenly seem to be a different person? And his performance was more outstanding than the other disciples. Shangguan Xiniao, who had been working continuously for several days, didn't think about the formation anymore. Instead, she sat down cross-legged and adjusted her slightly chaotic thoughts. Zhen Dejuan, who was outside, also had a chance to breathe. After all, he had been answering the girl's doubts about various formations. However, what made him gratified was that bringing Shangguan Xiniao was really a wise choice. If not for this girl, even if he studied for a lifetime, he wouldn't be able to find the flaw. Jun Changxiao thought to himself, if Xiniao can solve the formation and help the sect obtain the various physique inheritances in the pagoda, she should be able to obtain a lot of merit points. At that time, there will definitely be a place for her in the Lingyan Pavilion. There were many disciples in the sect of all times, but there were only 24 places, so he hoped that 24 different disciples would enter. The next day, Shangguan Xiniao continued to study the formation. After a night of rest, her mind also became clear. When she pondered again, she found that there were some more subtle things that she didn't notice. Up until now, the Death Pagoda had already consumed a lot of chapters. Whether or not the follow-up procedures could be omitted, whether or not they could obtain the rewards, all depended on this girl. So, she was also under a lot of pressure. Don't worry, don't panic. You can do it. You definitely won't let the patriarch down. Shangguan Xiniao encouraged herself in her heart. Then she started to study the ancient formation. Many pictures filled the sea of consciousness. It was like a fast-paced movie that kept changing. The lines and formations also seemed to come alive, constantly moving and changing positions. At that moment, Shangguan Xiniao's soul seemed to fly out of her body and into the vast universe. With a light wave of her jade-like hands, the planets and galaxies were rearranged. No. Wrong. Wrong again. Again and again, she deduced and overturned. If it were anyone else, they would have exploded on the spot with this kind of complicated brain work. Patriarch, Li Qingyang reminded her. It's about time to go to the seventh heaven. Wait a little longer, Jun Changxiao said. He had to seize every minute and every second to provide more time for the disciples to solve the formation. Swish! At this moment, Shangguan Xiniao, who was sitting cross-legged on the ground, suddenly stood up and said excitedly, Patriarch, Elder Zhen, I found the biggest flaw. Just that. Frowning, she said, if I change it, it might cause the formation to explode. The previous changes had been carefully calculated and deduced. Even if it failed, it wouldn't explode. But this time, the flaw found could succeed or explode. Xiniao, Jun Changxiao said seriously, no matter what, you have to believe in your own judgment because no one can help you decide. Patriarch, Shangguan Xiniao looked over and saw the encouraging eyes of the patriarch and the nonchalant smiles of the senior brothers. At that moment, everyone gave the most difficult multiple-choice question to their junior sister, without any reason to believe. Although Shangguan Hong didn't know what the sect of all times was talking about, he could see from the eyes of Jun Changxiao and the disciples that they trusted their granddaughter the most. Child, the old man smiled and said, you didn't choose the wrong sect. It's worth your effort and fight for. Understood. Shangguan Xiniao took a deep breath and then closed her eyes. Her spiritual sense merged into the complex array and began to erase a few lines. At the same time, she drew out a few lines. Zhen Dejuan watched the whole process. Seeing this change, his face changed slightly and said to himself, this is really a bold idea. Swish! All of a sudden, the mirror projection formation in the various cities and prefectures was shut down. Why is it gone? We are about to enter the seventh heaven and earth. Why did it suddenly stop? Everyone collapsed. Swish! About half an hour later, the scene was restored again. Jun Changxiao and the others were already in another world. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief when they saw the live footage. No. The angle of the scene was bigger and more comprehensive than the previous few times. It was as if they were standing at the highest point. Girl. Zhen Dejuan said telepathically. The internal formation has been connected to the mirror projection formation. Shengguan Xinyao smiled brightly and said, Patriarch, I can adjust the difficulty of this place at will. Do you want to challenge, or go to the eighth heaven and earth? Before Jun Changxiao could speak, Yi Xingchen said first, Challenge the most difficult one. Give him the most difficult one. Okay. Shengguan Xinyao had mastered the formation, and gave her senior brother a solo test. And the difficulty was also the highest. Whoosh whoosh. In an instant, extremely powerful negative emotions surged over, corroding Yi Xingchen's consciousness. His pupils constricted, and he squatted on the ground while hugging his head. He said in despair and inferiority, I'm trash. I shouldn't be living in this world. P.S. Readers have always been worried about Su Xiaoma. In fact, he had been using a face-changing mask. It could not only change his appearance but also his voice. When he returned to the sect, even if he stood in the Taishan Shengzong martial arts arena, no one would recognize him as Go Sheng. Of course, in the subsequent plot, if the author was kicked in the head by a donkey, his identity might be exposed, and there would be a thrilling farewell. I can't make it up anymore. Chapter 798. Shengguan Xinyao did not choose the wrong sect, because not only did she have the support of the patriarch, she also had the support of her fellow sect members. But Yi Xingchen seemed to have chosen the wrong sect, because ever since he entered the sect, the number of times he acted cool was not much, but the number of times he made a fool of himself was quite a lot. For example, the test of the seventh heaven and earth originated from negative emotions. Not only did a martial artist have absolute perseverance, but they also had to have a positive attitude. Otherwise, it would be easy to be eroded and lead to despair and inferiority. Night Emperor's perseverance was indescribable. His attitude towards revenge could be considered positive. If it was normal, he would be able to withstand it. However, the difficulty of the non-challenge was the highest. What was the most difficult? Naturally, it was to activate the age and soul restrictions. When the negative emotions that were several times more than the normal mode swarmed over, Night Emperor did not even resist. He directly squatted on the ground and howled. He even felt so inferior that he lost the courage to live. Sigh. He could not be blamed for choosing the wrong sect. He could only blame himself for courting death. Quick, Jun Changxiao hurriedly said. Hurry up and stop. It was not easy to show Yi Xingchen's strength in the previous two worlds. This guy was squatting on the ground like a little wife, crying and making a fuss. Wouldn't all their previous efforts be in vain? Xiao. Shengguan Xinyao hurriedly turned off the test mode. I'm too trash. My living in this world is polluting the air, polluting. Yi Xingchen, who was howling in despair, suddenly stopped. Immediately he was stunned. What did I say just now? The most painful thing in the world was that although the sea of consciousness was controlled by various negative emotions, and said things that shouldn't be said, after it was over, he actually remembered it clearly. At that moment, Yi Xingchen squatted on the ground, and did not stand up for a long time. He covered his tear-stained face with his hands and roared in his heart. What the hell am I saying? At this time, if there was a song with plum blossoms as the background music, it would definitely be very appropriate. What's going on? Yi Xingchen said that he's trash. I heard it. He even cried. Although Shengguan Xinyao cancelled the test mode in time, Yi Xingchen's words and actions were completely transmitted to the outside world, and appear in the eyes of all the martial artists in the continent. The fans, who were still shouting, were all stunned on the spot with tears in their eyes. Their idol was the most outstanding, hardworking, and the most, but now he was denying himself. could not accept it. Everyone. At this moment, Jun Changshao hurriedly tried to smooth things over. The seventh heaven's test is to make people disheartened and despair. My disciple is showing you what it means to be disheartened and helpless. Get. Calm Yi Xingchen stood stand. When he thought about what he had just done, and said in the projection array, he wished he could find a hole to hide in. His acting is so good. I almost believed him. After Jun Changxiao's explanation, all the martial artists were enlightened. Xing Fan's fans also burst into laughter. They thought proudly, this is my idol's acting. No one will dare to doubt him in the future. Of course, some people were puzzled. Since there were all kinds of negative auras in the seventh world, why were they fine standing there? Come. Jun Changxiao said telepathically, this is a live broadcast. You can't be too casual. Act for me. They could not let outsiders know that they were controlling the array. Since they were in the seventh world, they had to act well even if they had to. Su Xiaoma howled and lay down. He clenched his fists and knocked on the ground. This is too embarrassing. I don't want to live anymore. Why do I still have the courage to live in this world? Why don't I just die? Li Qingyang clenched his fists and lowered his head. He tried to blink his tears, but no matter how hard he tried, he could not feel it. At that moment, he turned around to look at Xiao Ziji. He had his back to the camera. He secretly took out a green onion and wiped the corner of his eyes. Soon his eyes were filled with tears. Life is meaningless. Li Qingyang howled and walked over. He put his arm on Xiao Ziji's shoulder and said telepathically with his back to the camera, Junior brother, give me some. Clang. The sound of a sword being unsheathed was heard. Jun Changxiao placed the sword on his neck. He looked up and said sorrowfully, although the sect of all times has been passed down from ancient times, we are still inferior to the world. Jun is ashamed to face the spirits of our ancestors in heaven. His voice was solemn and sorrowful. Fuck. The patriarch is still the best. The patriarch is still the best at acting. What are you bastards looking at? Come and take the sword. Do you really want me to commit suicide in front of everyone? Jun Changxiao said telepathically. Patriarch. Su Xiaomo reacted the fastest. He immediately rushed over and snatched the sword away. Then he clamped it on his neck and cried, I'm a burden if I live. I'm willing to go to the underworld first. After waiting for a while, Li Qingyang, Xiao Ziji, and the others could only care about their own despair. No one came to persuade him. He could only put down the sword and howl. How can trash like me taint a sword? Everyone was speechless. They could see that although the disciples of the sect of all times were complaining that they did not want to live, none of them really wanted to die. Just like that, under the eyes of the whole world, Jun Changxiao and some of the disciples acted for a full hour. Then he pretended to suddenly regain his senses and said in shock, what did I do just now? Patriarch. Li Qingyang pointed to the front and said, the stairs to the eighth heaven and earth have appeared. We passed just like that. Jun Changxiao was not in a hurry to enter the eighth heaven and earth. He continued to rest where he was. For now, the entire array system that existed in the 10-directional life-ending tower was controlled by Shengguan Xinyao. However, the area in charge of the reward system was in a damaged state, so she still had to work hard. You can do it, Jun Changxiao encouraged her. Okay. Shengguan Xinyao also had enough confidence. It was not because she controlled the array, but because the patriarch and senior brothers all believed in her. Let's go. The next day, Jun Changxiao led the disciples to the eighth heaven and earth. The test here was the opposite of negative emotions. The cultivators who entered would fall into an illusion where their wishes came true. Some wanted to become a powerhouse. They would have the illusion that they had already become a martial emperor and could summon clouds and rain with a flip of their hand. Some craved beauty and had groups of wives and concubines, living a carefree and happy life. As long as one dared to dream, the eighth heaven and earth would give them everything they wanted. However, the prerequisite was that if they were completely immersed in it and could not extricate themselves, they would be trapped forever. After hearing the illusionary martial emperor's introduction, Jun Changshao did not let Shengguan Xinyao start the test. He continued to act like he was in a drunken stupor with his disciples. When it was over, they would enter the ninth heaven and earth. Medicine, medicine, medicine! Elder Zhou shouted anxiously. Elder Zhen hurriedly took out a pile of pills and stuffed them into Yi Tianqing's mouth. Passing the third heaven and earth was equivalent to setting a modern record. Now that the sect of all times had entered the eighth heaven and earth, it was equivalent to breaking the ancient record. When he thought about how he could show off to the people from other certification centers in the future, not only could he proudly say that the area he was in charge of had a sect that won the Dragon Tiger Hegemony competition, but he could also proudly say that they had broken the 10-directional life-ending towers record that had been sealed for 10,000 years. Yi Tianqing was so excited that he could not control himself. The ninth heaven and earth. The test here was more impressive because it combined the physical body, movement technique, spiritual energy, bone honing soul, 5 elements, negative emotions and temptation of the previous 8 heavens and earth. Of course, it was not done one by one. It was done by thunder and lightning. In the words of the creator of the ninth heaven and earth, the Thunder Punishment Martial Emperor, this place was called the Thunder Punishment Heaven and Earth. The thunder tribulation that descended contained all the tests of the previous 8 levels. As long as one could withstand one attack, one would be qualified to enter the 10th heaven and earth. Xinyao, Jun Changshao said, lower the difficulty to the lowest. I'll give it a try. System, look at Yi Xingchen. If he wanted to play, he would play the most difficult one. You actually lowered the difficulty to the lowest. What's the point of this? What's the fun in this? Okay. Shengguan Xinyao controlled the array. Whoosh. After a while, in the sky that resembled dusk, rolling thunderclouds gradually condensed and spat out lightning snakes. Boom! The lightning that contained many tests sprayed down and instantly lit up the entire space. It accurately hit Jun Changshao. The physical body, bones, soul, and all kinds of negative emotions and illusions all burst out, instantly causing him to enter a very sour rhythm. Fortunately, the difficulty was the lowest. After a short period of despair, Jun Changshao recovered and said in a cold sweat, if this is a little stronger, I won't be able to withstand it at all. Xingchen, do you want to give it a try? Yi Xingchen was silent. At this time, he did not dare to act cool. Xinyao, open the staircase to the 10th heaven and earth. Okay. Buzz. The staircase to the 10th heaven and earth gradually appeared. He passed. It's over after being struck by lightning. Why is this 10-direction suicide tower getting simpler and simpler? The audience's eyes widened. It was not that it was getting simpler and simpler, but that Jun Changshao had to make it simple. What will the last heaven and earth be? The 10-direction suicide tower was very similar to the Tower of Trials, but the latter only had 9 floors. So Jun Changshao was more curious about the test in the 10th heaven and earth. If it was a hodgepodge of all the tests in the level, then the 9th floor was already there. The more he couldn't figure it out, the more curious he was. Let's go up. After resting for a day, under everyone's gaze, Jun Changshao led his disciple to the staircase to the 10th heaven and earth. The scene on the light screen disappeared again. Everyone was looking forward to the latest scene, but after waiting for a full 15 minutes, the light screen was still dark, and no new image was transmitted in. What's going on? Buzz! An image appeared on the light screen. It was not the so-called 10th heaven and earth, but outside the tower. Zhen Diyuan stood in front of the camera and announced helplessly, there is a restriction in the 10th heaven and earth, and we can't get the image information. No way. Everyone collapsed. There were 10 worlds in the 10-direction suicide tower, and the most important one was definitely the last one. It was hard for anyone to accept that they could not be transmitted out, and could not see it with their own eyes. This was like watching a TV series. After waiting for the finale with untold hardships, they would definitely be angry and curse. Although there was no new image transmitted, all the martial artists were still paying attention to the scene outside the tower, because they were waiting to see if the Sect of all times could come out. If they came out, it meant that they had passed the 10-direction suicide tower. In this ancient era where experts were as common as clouds, only martial artists could reach the sixth heaven and earth. If they really passed, the shock it would bring would be very strong. The 10th heaven and earth. This was an even more illusory scene, and Jun Changshao and his disciples, who had entered this place, stood there in a daze. At this moment, images appeared in their eyes, flashing past like passing clouds, and finally fixed on an environment full of spiritual energy. There were mountains, rivers, and all kinds of birds and beasts. The air was filled with a desolate and ancient aura, and Jun Changshao and his disciples seemed to have turned into soul bodies, floating high in the sky, and taking in the scene below. Patriarch, Li Qingyang transmitted his voice. Boom, boom. Suddenly, a deafening sound was heard. Without thinking, they instinctively turned to look and saw a burly middle-aged man in the sky, holding a mountain in his hand. That was not a mountain. It was more like a miniature version of heaven and earth. Great wilderness destruction. The middle-aged man roared angrily, and the heaven and earth that he was holding suddenly flew out, and then expanded rapidly, as if covering the entire world in an instant. Whoosh whoosh, the wind whistled, and the space shattered. Although Jun Changshao and his disciples were watching from the side as soul bodies, they could clearly feel the explosion of that terrifying power. In an instant, they could tell from the words great wilderness destruction, and the voice that this middle-aged man must be the martial emperor of the great wilderness on the first level of the 10-direction suicide tower. Break it! Angry roars came from below the heaven and earth of the great wilderness. Several experts whose cultivation were not weaker than the martial emperor of the great wilderness shone with dazzling light. And then a terrifying power burst out, turning into fists and punching. Bang! 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 Every punch was shocking to Jun Changshao and the others, and they were certain that these people's cultivation had reached the martial emperor level. At that time, there were very few martial emperors, but now there were so many of them. Combined with the desolate environment, they immediately realized that what they were seeing now was definitely the scene of the battle of the martial emperors 10,000 years ago. That's right. What appeared before them was the scene of the battle of the martial emperors, where the martial emperor of the great wilderness fought against several martial emperors. Bang! 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 Whoosh whoosh. Under the bombardment of power, the great wilderness destruction began to crack, but it continued to sink. Finally, under the gaze of Jun Changshao and the others, it crashed into the ground. Rumble! At the moment of contact, a corner of the continent could not bear the load, and immediately burst open. Then, under the impact of the impact, it floated all the way to the east. Damn! He had directly shattered the world. Jun Changshao and his disciples widened their eyes, and even Yi Xingchen was shocked. It turned out that the martial emperors of the ancient times were so powerful. When he was at his peak, he would definitely be defeated. Shwa! The Great Desolation martial emperor landed, and sat cross-legged on the Great Desolation heaven. From his perspective, his back was facing Jun Changshao and the others. His body was gradually petrified from his legs. What was going on? Everyone's faces were filled with astonishment. Ka. Suddenly, a cracking sound could be heard. The crack in the grand wilderness continued to expand and expand. It's about to shatter, Jun Changshao murmured. Ka. Ka. When the heavens and earth of the great wilderness split apart, the lower body of the martial emperor of the great wilderness, that was gradually petrified, also began to show dense cracks. At that moment, everyone suddenly realized that the vast wilderness was connected to him. AI. The Great Desolation martial emperor let out a long sigh. Before he was completely petrified, he tried his best to turn his head and said with an aged voice, "My Great Desolation land shall be inherited by you." Jun Changshao was stunned. Subconsciously, he followed the expert's gaze and looked at Xiao Ziji. "No. Can he find us?" Xiao Ziji said. "Thank you, senior." The two of them looked at each other and smiled. At that moment, they seemed to have crossed time and space. It was like two people from two different eras had completed some kind of ritual at a special node. Ka. The cracking sound continued. The vast wilderness was already full of scars. The Great Desolation martial emperor of the great wilderness was completely petrified. In the end, He completely collapsed under everyone's gaze and turned into dust. The two martial emperors who were suppressed below had their flesh and blood torn apart. Jun Changshao and the others fell silent. The martial emperors of the ancient era died just like that. It was a little sad. Swoosh! At this moment, the scene before his eyes changed again. A streak of light sped through the boundless land at a speed that made one gasp in amazement. Ta! After running for a long time, that person gradually came to a stop. He then shook his head and looked at Su Xiaoma in the sky. He smiled and said, "Little guy, how about I give you this body of Gale?" "Thank you, senior," Su Xiaoma said excitedly. Buzz! The space shook and the scene in front of them changed again. An expert was fighting with a few people. Although he was fighting alone, the strength and purity of his spiritual energy were much higher than others. Boom! Boom! The battle lasted for a long time, and it was earth-shattering. The land in the south could not withstand the pressure, and directly separated from the mainland. Jun Changshao and the others were shocked. The emperor-level expert of the ancient era had such a terrifying cultivation. It was not an exaggeration to say that he could destroy the world. Based on their level of battle, the world was considered lucky that it was not completely destroyed and was only broken into pieces. After an intense battle, the martial emperor who was fighting alone defeated a few experts of the same level. However, he was also severely injured. He then looked at Jun Changshao and the others and said, "Who will inherit my body of spiritual pulse?" "Me." Yi Xingchen spoke first. If it were any other body type, the Night Emperor would definitely maintain his cold demeanor. However, this was the body of spiritual pulse, and he could not back down. Martial Emperor Ling Ju looked at Yi Xingchen with a hint of disdain in his eyes. Fuck. What kind of look is that? Could it be that I, a bona fide martial emperor, inheriting a spirit vein, is something that he finds very embarrassing? Whoosh! The scene in front of them continued to change. More martial emperors appeared, and more intense battles took place in front of them. After watching a few more battles, Jun Changshao finally understood that the 10th world did not test them. It only took them back to 10,000 years ago to witness the earth-shattering battle of the martial emperors. However, what puzzled him was, judging from the scene, it was clearly a scene left behind in advance. Why would Martial Emperor Da Huang, Martial Emperor Chengfeng, and the others capture his and his disciples' presence and choose the inheritor of the body type? Could it be that it was not a movie left behind, but a special ability that could fold the space of two different eras together, so that they could spy on each other? That's possible, the system said. Whoosh! At that moment, the scene in front of them changed again. They appeared in a forest with lush foliage. "This is," Jun Changshao said in surprise. "Where is the 10-direction life-ending tower?" The environment was right, but there was no tower. Whoosh! 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 At that moment, streams of light flew over. They were the martial emperor Da Huang, and the others who had died earlier. There was also a black-robed old man, who they had not seen in the previous scene. He stood at the place where the 10-direction life-ending tower was supposed to be and said, "Everyone, how about we set up a stone tower here to seal all the body types, and leave them for the future generations to inherit?" Jun Changshao was enlightened. No wonder the 10-direction life-ending tower was not here. It was not built yet. Sure. No problem. Martial Emperor Da Huang, Martial Emperor Chengfeng, and the others agreed. The black-robed old man said, "Let's begin." The 9 ancient martial emperors immediately performed their special abilities and took out pieces of square stones. They then piled up a 10-story tower in the shortest time possible. After the tower was built, the scene changed to the inside. The black-robed old man was setting up the array and defense on the first floor. The entire process seemed to be slowed down. However, due to the complexity of the process, Li Qingyang, Xiao Ziji, and the others were dazzled. Shengguan Xingyao's face was filled with joy. As the black-robed old man continued setting up, she gradually gained a more comprehensive and intuitive understanding of the array on the first floor. "Have you memorized it?" Jun Changshao asked. Shengguan Xingyao said excitedly, "Patriarch, I've memorized it." Swoosh! At that moment the scene changed again. The black-robed old man appeared on the second floor, and continued setting up the array on the third floor, the fourth floor, and even the 10th floor. I see. Although the array was very complicated, Shengguan Xinyao memorized it all, and had a new understanding of the structure inside. Everyone, the black-robed old man said. The array on each heaven and earth has been set up. If someone dies, their body type will be separated and integrated into the array, being sealed forever. However, he paused and said, it can't be taken away easily. Therefore, I suggest that each of you choose a heaven and earth to guard, and leave behind a test. Only the fated ones can obtain it. The Great Desolation Martial Emperor was the first to speak. I'll guard the first heaven and earth. I'll guard the second heaven and earth. I'll guard the third heaven and earth. The first to 9th floors were occupied by 9 ancient martial emperors, and left behind a test with their abilities. The black-robed old man said, I'll guard the 10th floor. If the future generations can reach here, not only can they obtain the body type stored here, but they can also peek into the array's secrets and control the entire 10 Directions Opportunity Pagoda. It turned out that the stone pagoda's real name was the 10 Directions Opportunity Pagoda. However, due to the difficulty of the challenge, many cultivators died inside. As time passed, it was named the Suicide Pagoda. Next, the black-robed old man raised his head and looked at Shengguan Xinyao. He smiled kindly and said, it's time to set up the reward array. Girl, look carefully. Swoosh, swoosh. Streams of light flashed as array flags flew out. They were not only placed on the 10th floor, but also around the pagoda, forming a pattern similar to the 5 elements 8 trigrams. Swoosh, swoosh. The messy lines were drawn and then connected to the array. The entire process was done in one go. It meant that the person who set up the array was definitely a top-notch array master. Shengguan Xinyao stared at it without blinking. Images appeared in her sea of consciousness, reorganizing and expanding. Finally, it evolved into an extremely complicated star-scattered chessboard. It's so messy. I can't understand it at all. Li Qingyang and Xiao Ziji didn't have array talent. When they saw the lines drawn, they felt like they were reading a heavenly book. Jun Changshao might be able to understand it, but after receiving so much information at once, he felt like his brain was about to explode. Patriarch. Not long later, Shengguan Xinyao said, I already understand the structure of the pagoda's array. I can control it easily. I can also take the sealed body types at will. Jun Changshao was overjoyed. Swish. At that moment, the scene in front of them disappeared. Everyone returned to the illusory realm of the 10th floor. Wang. With a thought, Shengguan Xian Yao instantly fused into the damaged array formation, and then reconnected the damaged array formation. Wang. After the repair was completed, the space vibrated slightly. One could only see elf-like lights appearing. Patriarch. Shengguan Xinyao said, these are the 10 body types sealed in the pagoda. From left to right, they are the Great Desolation Body, Raging Wind Body, Spiritual Pulse Body, and the last one is the Formation Spirit Body. I can summon all of them. You can now distribute them as you wish. Chapter 799. The last world of the 10 Directions Suicide Tower was overseen by the ancient Array Emperor. Inside were some scenes of the Battle of the Emperors 10,000 years ago, as well as the entire process of the array formation. Or perhaps, the black-robed old man who set up the array formation had already calculated that one day in the future, someone would enter the 10th world. So he deliberately left behind the method of setting up the array formation in the form of an image. Rather than calling it a test, it would be better to call it an opportunity for those who passed. Shengguan Xinyao did not disappoint, and successfully controlled the entire tower's array formation system. Not only did she repair the reward mechanism, she also summoned out all the physiques that were sealed within. There was 1 on each floor, and there were 10 on the 10th floor. They were like a ball of flame, or a flickering spirit, floating in the 10th world. From the first world to the 10th, they were the Great Desolation Physique, Gale Physique, spiritual pulse physique, sword transforming physique, primordial spirit physique, 5 elements physique, frustration physique, illusory physique, thunder punishment physique, and formation spirit physique. Li Qingyang said in surprise. So there is a form of the physique. In his understanding, whether it was innate or postnatal physique, they were all illusory. He never thought that they would exist like spirits. Jun Changxiao was relatively calm. After all, he had once fused with the sacred flame body, so he had some understanding of what form it was. There are exactly 10 people who came in to challenge, so let's split one each. Hearing this, the disciples' eyes lit up. At this moment, Jun Patriarch had taken all the physiques for himself, so the disciples would definitely not say anything. After all, he was the boss, so what he said was final. But it was definitely unrealistic for him to fuse with so many physiques. Not to mention, if all the good things were given to him, then what would the disciple use to represent the sect in the future? Xingyao. Jun Changxiao pointed to the ball of flame-like light on the far right, and said, the formation spirit body should be related to the array formation, so I will let you inherit it. Thank you, Patriarch. Shengguan Xingyao happily summoned the physique over. The little guy was not disgusted. It circled around her in circles, as if it was very happy. Although this kind of physique that was similar to light could not speak, it had its own thoughts, and was able to form some kind of connection with the martial warriors. I have sinned, Jun Changxiao said. The Great Desolate physique is yours. In the previous image, the Great Desolation Martial Emperor had looked at Xiao Ziji, so it was most suitable for him to inherit this constitution. Yes, Xiao Ziji walked over and held the Great Desolate physique in his hands. When his palm came into contact with the light, a thick and heavy aura spread out, instantly making him excited and agitated. Bubbly foam, the body of Gale is yours. Yes, Su Xiaoma and Li Fei were both speed-type martial artists, but the former was a little faster, while the latter's specialty was his leg strength. Zhou Hong, the sword transformation body is yours. After all, Jun Changxiao did not deliberately pursue the sword Dao. Among the disciples present, he was the only one who could inherit it. Body of spiritual veins. Patriarch, Yi Xingchen said without hesitation. This disciple is willing to inherit. Although the other physiques were not bad, he did not care about them. He only hoped to inherit the physique that would allow him to increase his cultivation faster. All right, Jun Changxiao said. Take it. Thank you, Patriarch. Yi Xingchen anxiously walked over and held the body of spiritual veins in his hands, a smile appearing on his face. Night Emperor laughed. Night Emperor actually laughed. However, the body of spiritual veins in his hands was struggling, as if it was not satisfied with its new owner. Behave yourself, Yi Xingchen shouted in a deep voice. With such a scare, the little guy immediately became obedient. Jun Changxiao said, Elder Jiang, I'll give you the primordial spirit body. Thank you, Patriarch. Jiangye took the primordial spirit body and wondered in his heart, what is the use of this thing? If he knew that the primordial spirit body could accurately capture everything around it like spiritual sense, he would definitely jump up in excitement. After all, it would undoubtedly be of great help in finding his sister. Little Fei, Jun Changxiao said, choose one. Air. Li Fei scratched his head and said, disciple will choose the body of frustration. What about you? Jun Changxiao looked at Lu Qianqian. Lu Qianqian said, disciple doesn't need it. She already had an ice attribute physique, so she wasn't interested in other physiques. You really don't want it? No. All right then. Jun Changxiao looked at Li Qingyang and said, there's still the body of illusionary dream, and the body of thunder punishment left. You can choose one. Li Qingyang scratched his head and said, Patriarch, these two physiques don't seem to be of much use to this disciple. It's better to leave them for suitable fellow disciples. Jun Changxiao said, even if it's not suitable, you have to choose one. He knew that his second disciple had a gentle personality and did not fight for anything. However, since he was here to challenge the level, he naturally could not lack the benefits. How about this? Jun Changxiao said. Body of illusionary dream for Chanqian, body of thunder punishment for you. Yes. Li Qingyang held up the body of thunder punishment. Lu Chanqian could only give up the body of illusionary dream. If the martial artists in the outside world knew that the two of them were forced to accept the physiques by the patriarch, they would definitely be extremely envious. This kind of physique from ancient times, even if it was not of any substantial help to martial arts, they would definitely not dislike it. They would take as many as they could. 9 out of 10 physiques were divided, and the remaining 5 elements physique would definitely be Jun Changxiao's. Patriarch. Su Xiaoma said, "How do we fuse?" Sit down cross-legged and communicate with it with your spiritual thoughts, guiding it into your body, Jun Changxiao said. Swoosh. Swoosh. Everyone sat down cross-legged. Whoosh. Xiao Ziji was the first to communicate with the great desolate physique. When his spiritual thoughts touched it, the other party turned into a cloud and covered his entire body. The process of fusing the physiques was extremely simple. When he absorbed all the cloud and mist, a small world the size of a fingernail gradually condensed in his dantian. This was the great desolate world. Although it was very small, after successfully condensing, it established a certain connection with his flesh and blood. Xiao Ziji communicated with it slightly, and felt that the strength and hardness of his body had increased by a lot. The great desolate world had just been condensed, and the defensive strength it provided was limited. If he wanted to use it in the future, he would definitely have to temper and strengthen it. As for reaching the level where the great desolate martial emperor could use it to smash people, there was still a long way to go. Jun Changxiao did not wish for his disciple to one day use the great desolate world to smash people, because at this step, it would definitely be a battle of life and death. Zizi. Li Qingyang stood up and opened his right hand. Streaks of lightning condensed in his palm, and he said in surprise, "I'm a lightning cultivator now?" Ha ha ha. Su Xiaoma's laughter could be heard. A whirlwind gathered under his feet, and he ran at his fastest speed. Zhou Hong stood up. He looked very normal, but the sharpness around him was as if his entire body had turned into a sharp sword. My spiritual thoughts have been strengthened. After Jiang emerged with his primordial spirit, his eyes flashed with ecstasy. With a slight release, it could even spread to a range of more than 10 miles. Patriarch. Li Fei opened his right hand, and a ball of black attributes condensed. He said, "What's the use of my physique? Find a target and try it." Jun Changxiao said. "Oh." Li Fei threw it at Su Xiaoma, who had just stopped. When the black attributes merged into his body, the latter knelt on the ground and cried, "I'm not even comparable to an ant. My life is meaningless." This was not an act, it was real. "Do you understand now?" Jun Changxiao said. Li Fei was enlightened. "I understand. The attributes condensed by my physique can make people depressed and despair." Xiao. At this moment, his sea of consciousness was suddenly penetrated by some kind of energy. Li Fei was stunned. He suddenly felt as if he had turned into a bird, and then flapped his wings, flying freely in the sky. "Fly, fly, fly." He waved his hands with a silly smile and ran around the 10th heaven, looking very funny. Jun Changxiao's mouth twitched, and then he looked at Lu Qianqian. Needless to say, this woman must have fused with the illusory body, causing Li Fei to fall into fantasy and dream. Ha ha ha. Ha 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 ha. Suddenly, Yi Xingchen covered his face and laughed. He had already fused with the spirit vein physique. As long as he circulated the Taishan Sutra and body metamorphosis scripture slightly, he could feel extremely pure attributes of heaven and earth spreading over like a tsunami. With this physique, there was no need to worry about not being able to break through quickly. This incident tells us that no matter how arrogant and cold a person is, as long as they encounter something that makes them feel good, they will also laugh until they lose control of their bladder. Everyone. Suddenly, the Array Emperor's old voice sounded. "Congratulations on inheriting the physique sealed in the 10 Directions Opportunity Pagoda, but you also have to bear the responsibility." "Responsibility?" Jun Changxiao said. The Array Emperor continued. "Why did the War of the Thearchs happen 10,000 years ago? Aren't you curious?" "Not curious. Jun Changshao said. Xiniao, open the entrance to the outside world, we'll return to the sect. Yes. The Array Emperor. Fusing with the physique and then leaving. This was too fucked up. Buzz. The space shook, and the stairs to the outside world opened. Jun Changshao cupped his hands and said, Sorry for the disturbance. Then he was about to leave with his disciples. Young man, the Array Emperor hurriedly said. Wait, I'm not finished. Chapter 800. Jun Changshao wasn't interested in finding out why the War of the Emperors had happened 10,000 years ago. In his opinion, since he had already obtained the benefits of the 10-directional life-ending tower, and he and his disciples had also inherited the constitution, he would definitely leave happily. Moreover, the entire continent was still waiting for him to pass. That's right. His main purpose of entering the 10-direction suicide tower was to raise his ranking on the hero-seeking board. He had brought his disciple through the tower without any injuries, and had broken many records. He would definitely raise his ranking. Obtaining 10 physiques would raise his sect's ranking. Jun Changshao suddenly felt like he had reached the pinnacle of his life. Patriarch. Shengguan Xiniao said, Senior Array Emperor must have something important to tell us. Otherwise, he wouldn't have left a trace of his remnant soul in the tower. All right. Jun Changshao stopped and said, For the sake of my precious disciple, I'll give you a few minutes. Hurry up and say everything you need to say. Young man, the remnant soul of the Array Emperor in the formation said, 10,000 years ago, the War of Emperors started because the Falling Star continent was invaded by foreign tribes from other realms. Invaded by foreign tribes? Jun Changshao asked in surprise. The Array Emperor said, It's a special existence without a physical body. It can control a martial artist's soul and do things that bring disaster to the world. The experts killed by Martial Emperor Da Huang and Martial Emperor Ling Ju were controlled by the foreign tribes? Jun Changshao asked. That's right, the Array Emperor said. Li Qingyang, Xiao Ziji, and the others' faces changed slightly. They did not see anything different about the martial emperors who were killed earlier. Jun Changshao was speechless. Wasn't this kind of realm invasion a little too old-fashioned? Get to the point, Jun Changshao said. For example, what's our responsibility? The Array Emperor said. Although Martial Emperor Da Huang and the others sacrificed themselves to defeat the foreign tribes, their ambitions will not disappear just like that. They will definitely come back in the future. All of you must take up the responsibility of protecting the Falling Star continent. I'm sorry, Jun Changshao said. The responsibility of saving the common people and maintaining world peace should be left to others. Suddenly, someone asked you to protect the entire continent. It was like running into an old faker who claimed that he was the hero who saved the world when he went out to buy soy sauce. Young man, the Formation Emperor said solemnly, you have all inherited the physique legacies left behind by the emperors. You must do your best for the Falling Star continent. Sorry, I'm not interested, Jun Changshao said. Let's go. Everyone followed him and was about to walk out of the pagoda. The Formation Emperor hurriedly said, Young man, if you protect the Falling Star continent, you will definitely be rewarded. Shua. Jun Changshao returned to his previous position and said, Everyone is responsible for the rise and fall of the continent. The corners of the disciples' mouths twitched. Speaking of benefits, the speed of the Patriarch's return was almost as fast as Wu Sheng's teleportation. The Formation Emperor did not expect that his words of benefits would make this guy change his attitude immediately. So he continued, This foreign race from other planes can be called the soul race. They do not have a physical body and exist in the form of souls. As long as they occupy the body of a human, they will inherit the cultivation realm and martial arts. Even their style of doing things will be the same as the original owner. Jun Changshao asked curiously, How did you find out? The Formation Emperor said, These foreign races have a special method. They can devour the energy of any living creature and strengthen themselves over and over again. Jun Changshao said, Be more specific. The Formation Emperor said, Every flower and grass in the star-filled continent contains more or less energy under the nourishment of heaven and earth. The soul race can absorb them and use them for themselves. This is only for flowers and grass. If they absorb martial artists of higher cultivation realms, their strength will increase even faster. If they are allowed to do whatever they want, the end result will be that the entire falling star continent will be sucked dry of spirit qi and become a wasteland. That's a little scary, Jun Changshao said. The Formation Emperor said, when the soul race absorbs energy, they will release a green attribute. Later on we found out. After careful investigation, we found out that they are foreign races from other planes. Like locusts, they will crazily devour the energy of every plane they come to. They will only leave when they completely destroy it. How many soul race invaded the falling star continent 10,000 years ago? 9. The corner of Jun Changshao's mouth twitched. 9 foreign races triggered a war between the emperors. In the end, the entire continent was torn apart. That was too exaggerated. He had not experienced that era, and did not know that the soul race that occupied the 9 martial emperors had been absorbing energy in the early stages. When they found out, the experts of the falling star continent could not defeat them at all. In the end, they could only kill them with the determination to perish together. For example, the scene earlier, the Great Desolation Martial Emperor used the Great Desolation World to suppress the 2 foreign races easily. In fact, the complete scene was that more martial emperors had already fought with them multiple times. And in the end, they were either dead or injured. Seeing that he could not defeat them after a long time, and that countless of his companions had died, the Great Desolation Martial Emperor finally made up his mind, and used the Great Desolation World to perish together with the 2 foreign race experts. The Formation Emperor said, the soul race will not give up on destroying the falling star continent. One day they will make a comeback. I hope that you can inherit the constitution and will of your ancestors and fight them to the death. Senior, Jun Changshao said, let's put these things aside first and talk about the benefits. The Formation Emperor, I said it so tragically. Did he not feel anything? There are benefits, the Formation Emperor said, but it will depend on your performance in the future. Fuck. Jun Changshao immediately turned hostile. It feels like there are no benefits. You are deliberately tricking me. Young man, the Formation Emperor roared. Are there only benefits in your eyes and no lives in the world? The world is bustling with activity for profit. And the world is bustling with activity for profit. Jun Chang smiled and said, only things with benefits can move people's hearts. Otherwise, I'm not interested. If there are no benefits, I will leave. Young man, when the nest is overturned, no egg can remain intact. When the foreign race invades and the world is destroyed, do you think you can still live? The Formation Emperor roared angrily. Jun Changshao stopped and rubbed his chin. That makes sense, the Formation Emperor said. If you inherit the constitution, you will not only save the world, but also save yourselves. Jun Changshao said, are you sure the soul race will invade the falling star continent again? The Formation Emperor said with certainty. As long as the falling star continent still has spiritual energy, they will not give up. Do you have a specific time of invasion? Jun Changshao asked. The Formation Emperor was silent for a moment, then said, it may take a long time. Maybe they have already arrived at the falling star continent and have taken over human bodies. They are slowly growing. Where is the soul race's nest? Jun Changshao asked. The Formation Emperor said, why do you ask? Jun Changshao shrugged and said, invade them and nip the danger in the cradle in advance. Invade them. Chapter 801. If the Array Emperor had a physical body, his eyes would be wide open right now. He and the other martial emperors who had died on the battlefield only thought about how to defend against the invasion of other races. They had never thought about invading other races. Jun Changshao was different. Since he knew that the other party would come back, why should he wait? He might as well gather his people and kill them. Their souls would fall, their gods would tremble, and their ghosts would tremble. Defend and invade. It represented passivity and initiative. With Jun Changxiao's personality, if he knew that someone was targeting his sect and disciples, he would definitely take the initiative to attack first instead of passively accepting it. The Array Emperor said, "The soul race's world is extremely dangerous. Invading them is the same as committing suicide. You don't have to worry about that." Jun Changxiao said, "Tell me the coordinates, I have my ways to deal with it." The falling star continent and the soul race's world are very far apart. Without the ability to travel through space, it would be difficult to do so. The Array Emperor said. Jun Changxiao asked curiously, "If that's the case, how did they come to the falling star continent?" The Array Emperor said, 10,000 years ago, cracks appeared in space and formed a passage-like vortex. They should have used this method to come here. What about the passageway? I sealed it with a formation. Where is it? North of the continent, the land of yellow sand. The system said, it should be the northern desert state after the continent fell apart. Does the soul race have a hobby of collecting all kinds of martial arts resources? Jun Changxiao asked. The Array Emperor said, although they are other races, they also need spirit stones to increase their cultivation. They also need ores to forge all kinds of equipment to make themselves stronger. Jun Changxiao's eyes lit up. Although the Array Emperor did not say what benefits there were, in his opinion, if they had the chance to invade the other races, they would definitely gain more benefits. Since the Sect of all times has inherited the Constitution, we will naturally take on the responsibility of protecting the world. Jun Changxiao said, the system, as a host, I can't be so righteous. I won't disturb senior's everlasting existence. I'll take my leave first. Jun Changxiao snapped his fingers and said, let's go. Soon, the disciples followed him up the stairs and left the 10-directional life-ending tower. Sigh. The Array Emperor sighed and said, I've waited for 10,000 years for a guy like this. Asking him to save the world feels a little unreliable. His voice grew weaker as he spoke. A sliver of remnant will have been sealed within the pagoda, waiting for the fated ones to pass through the 10 directions opportunity pagoda. Now that it had completed its mission, it could no longer exist in the world. Outside, the projection arrays were still suspended in the sky above the major cities. Everyone was waiting anxiously. Creak! Suddenly, the 2 doors on the first floor of the tower were pushed open from the inside. He's out. Jun Patriarch and the others have come out. The martial artists who had been watching the projection array all this time suddenly cried out in surprise when they saw Jun Changxiao and the others walk out of the pagoda one by one. Going in neatly and coming out neatly, they would definitely clear the stage without any injuries. Everyone. Jun Changxiao looked up at the screen and grinned. The Sect of all times has successfully cleared the 10-directional Fate Tower. Amazing. Unbelievable. Hearing him say it personally, all the martial artists on the Falling Star continent looked at him with admiration and envy. Although there was no reward for this forbidden area that had existed for tens of thousands of years, being able to clear the stage without any injuries was definitely enough to prove their strength. Jun Patriarch. City Lord Han transmitted his voice. What's the test of the 10th heaven and earth? It's just a normal test, Jun Changxiao replied. City Lord Han could tell that this guy didn't want to tell him about the 10th heaven and earth, so he didn't ask any more questions. Instead, he smiled and said, Jun Patriarch, when will you pay the 10,000 spirit stones? Jun Changxiao was honest and gave him 10,000 artificial spirit stones as the rental fee for using the projection array system. City Lord Han said, if you want to use it again in the future, you can come find me at any time. After tasting the sweetness, he started to think, why not rent out the projection array system that he had set up for the dragon and tiger battle for supremacy to earn some money? City Lord Han didn't lack spirit stones. However, he had nothing to do with the array system. He could use it to earn some extra money and also cover the daily maintenance costs. Okay. Jun Changxiao cupped his hands and then chatted with City Lord Mu for a while. Then he ordered Jun Dijuan to remove the projection array and return to the sect with his disciples. On the way, Li Qingyang said, Patriarch, we have a great responsibility now. You don't really want to save the world, Do you? Jun Changshao said. Li Qingyang was startled. Didn't Patriarch already promise senior formation emperor? He did, but Jun Changshao said, to save the world, we have to act within our means. He didn't think that with his and his sect's strength, they could save the world. Not to mention that even if the sky collapsed, there were still the first and second-rate sects to hold it up. Qingyang, the most important task now is to make yourself stronger. When you have absolute strength in the future, not to mention saving the world, saving the entire universe won't be a problem, Jun Changshao said. Li Qingyang said solemnly, I understand. The matter of challenging the 10-direction suicide tower came to a perfect end. The physiques that existed inside were all taken away by the sect of all times. So even if the array was repaired now, even if the reward mechanism was adjusted to 100%, it was meaningless. The medical sage and demon emperor, who knew about it in the underworld, would definitely be able to face it calmly. The forbidden land that had existed for thousands of years couldn't escape being scourged by Jun Changshao. His own things were not worth mentioning at all. Of course, the matter of the sect of all times bravely challenging the 10-direction suicide tower and clearing it without any injuries would definitely be widely spread in the Falling Star continent. Not to mention, it was even a live broadcast. The latest issue of the List of Heroes was released at the stipulated time. The sect of all times rose from 90th to 80th. Not bad, not bad. Looking at the list, Jun Changshao smiled. The sect had reached 4th rate and was ranked 80th on the List of Heroes. It had already met the 7th most basic requirement of the epic mission. Of course, Jun Patriarch would definitely not be satisfied. After all, meeting the most basic requirement was only 100%. He had to exceed it and obtain a higher mission reward. Patriarch Su Xiaoma came to meet him and said, this disciple has been out of the Taishan Shengzong for a while. It's time to go back. Jun Changshao said, be careful when you go back. If you feel that your identity has been exposed, do not hesitate and quickly return to the sect. Yes. After eating Lu Wancher's food, Su Xiaoma left the sect of all times. Then, he found a place where no one was around and put on the mask again, turning into a pale and sickly youth. At this moment, he was the outer disciple of the Taishan Shengzong, Gosheng. Boom! Boom! In a mountain forest there was a loud explosion. Ka! 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 A fist mark appeared on the mountain wall under the strong impact. Then, it began to gradually shatter and spread in all directions, as if it was going to collapse at any time. A black-robed man once again punched the depression and roared, I was tricked. I was actually tricked. Chapter 802. Dai Lu was very angry. He was so angry that he crazily bombarded the stone wall. There was no other reason. During the Battle of the Dragons and Tigers, he took a yellowed map to look for treasures. He had worn out several pairs of shoes and finally found the location of the treasures. In the end, there was nothing. What made him even more depressed was that he met many martial artists one after another, each of them holding a map that was exactly the same as his. Everyone sat together, and after some discussion, they found out that the maps were all bought from the old man on the street. Therefore a normal person immediately realized that they had been cheated. Dai Lu raised his head and roared. The green attribute around him instantly spread out like waves. The nearby plants that came into contact with it instantly withered from their lush state. He originally thought that he could rely on the map to find opportunities to improve his cultivation, and then seek revenge on the sect of all times and Yi Xingchen. In the end, it was all for naught. This was unacceptable. Dai Lu roared. Is it so difficult for me to take revenge? Kid. Suddenly, a sinister voice sounded in his ear. To become stronger, you should absorb the energy of others. Only the weak would rely on such an illusory opportunity. Who is it? Dai Lu exclaimed. The voice continued. You can call me Han, or you can call me Lord. Dai Lu said coldly. Get out of my body. Hee hee. The existence that called itself Han laughed strangely. Once I leave, the devouring power will disappear immediately. You have to think carefully. Dai Lu's expression changed. He was now a martial king. All of this came from the devouring power. If he lost it, he would definitely not be able to accept it. Kid, with my help, you can become stronger. Only then can you trample the sect of all times, and Yi Xingqian in the palm of your hand. Han laughed strangely. Dai Lu said in a low voice, really? Although you have some understanding of the devouring power in the past 2 years, it has only stopped at the most basic level. Now that I have awakened, I will teach you how to use it correctly, Han said proudly. How do I use it? Dai Lu's heart skipped a beat. He had obtained the devouring power for no reason, and now there was a fellow who called himself Soul in his body for no reason. He quickly adapted to it. The devouring power can only be refined into purer energy when it is combined with the devouring heart sutra. I will teach you now. In an instant, a series of seemingly comprehensible chants appeared in Dai Lu's sea of consciousness, causing him to unconsciously immerse himself in them. After a while, his eyes suddenly glowed with a burning luster. Brat, Soul said proudly. I'm not bragging, but once I've comprehended 20 to 30% of the mantra, I can easily trample on the sect of all times and Yi Xingqian. Crack! Dai Lu clenched his fists. His eyes flickered with a green light as he said, I look forward to that day. Achoo! Jun Changshao, who was sitting in the study, sneezed, then rubbed his nose and said, Is someone scolding me? The system said, The host has inherited the ancient era's physique. Are you really not planning to do anything for the falling star continent? Even the ancient era's martial emperors could be controlled by the foreign races. I want to do something, but my strength doesn't allow me to. Jun Changshao said helplessly. The system said, They didn't say to let you save the world immediately. They passed the physique to their disciple in the hope that when you become stronger in the future, you can protect this plane. We'll see, Jun Changshao said. The system was speechless. This is because they didn't offend your sect or disciple. Otherwise, the host would have already expressed his stance. Of course, Jun Changshao said seriously. How dare they offend the sect of all times and touch my disciple? Not to mention the soul race. Even if it's the per race, I will kill them all. So to prevent a disaster from happening, I think the host should focus more on the foreign races. It's best to find time to go to the northern desert state, to see if you can break the formation and invade the foreign races through the passage. You can nip the danger in the bud, the system urged. Makes sense. That's not right. Jun Changshao suddenly became alert. This concerns the survival of the human race. Why is an emotionless machine like you so active? Of course, the system said. If the host is fighting against the foreign races, if you're not strong enough, you'll be tortured to death. You'll have to rely on the merchant store. This will stimulate spending. Fuck. Jun Changshao broke down. You want me to spend money? Don't be so direct. Can I become stronger just by relying on this mental cultivation method? The Devouring Heart Sutra can only make you stronger to a certain extent. If you want to break through to a higher level, such as breaking through the void, you'll have to inherit the devouring bloodline. Breaking through the void. Dai Lu's eyes turned green. How do I inherit the devouring bloodline? There's an area sealed by a formation in the desert of the northern desert state. Once you break it, you'll enter an independent space. The devouring bloodline is there. Ta. Dai Lu stopped and said warily. Why do you want to help me become stronger? Do you have other intentions? Soul. He was fooled by an old man from a street stall to look for treasure. Why did he suddenly say something like this? It's simple. Soul said. We have a common enemy. The sect of all times? That's right. I see. Dai Lu understood and said hatefully. Let's work together and let this sect say goodbye to the Jianghu. The sect of all times is a bit strong. It's hard to trample them with just the Heart Sutra. So I suggest you go to the northern desert state and break the formation seal to find the devouring bloodline, Soul said. I don't know anything about formations. It's okay. As long as you go, I'll be in charge of breaking the formation. Okay. Brother Green Scarf resolutely stepped on the road to the northern desert state. He started to imagine himself having the devouring bloodline. After taking revenge, he would break through the void and ascend to the upper world. Xingyao, get ready. Jun Changshao said. Follow me to the northern desert state in 2 days. We'll find the area where the Formation Emperor sealed the space passage. Patriarch, are you going to the foreign world? Shengguan Xingyao asked with widened eyes. Jun Changshao said. Since the space passage connects 2 worlds, I'm worried that it might be loose. If it's destroyed by the foreign world, it'll be troublesome. Understood, Shengguan Xingyao said. Patriarch, you're asking me to reinforce it. Patriarch, you're so considerate. It's really a blessing for the common people. Shengguan Xinyao's words made Jun Changshao feel embarrassed. After all, they were just going to confirm the entrance to the foreign world's territory. Their motive was not for the common people. Patriarch, Yi Xingchen volunteered. I'm willing to accompany you. After knowing the reason for the War of the Emperors 10,000 years ago, he was very curious about the Soul Tribe. Sure. After arranging the Sect's affairs, Jun Changshao picked a day to bring Shengguan Xingyao and Yi Xingchen to the northern desert state. Woohoo! In the northwestern He state, Dai Lu was also devouring energy on the way. Because he had the mental cultivation technique, his cultivation level was increasing very quickly. Not bad, not bad, Hun said with satisfaction. With your current growth speed, even if you don't challenge the entire sect of all times, it shouldn't be a problem to take down Yi Xingchen. Dai Lu smiled coldly and said, Don't let me meet that guy. Woohoo! In the desert of the northern desert state, the wind was howling. Sand and dust filled the sky like a storm. Patriarch, Shengguan Xingyao opened her eyes and said, This is the place where Senior Array Varch set up the array back then. Can you control it? The structure of the array is more complicated than the 10-directional life-ending pagoda. I might need some time. After inheriting the array spirit constitution, Shengguan Xinyao's understanding of array formations had improved by leaps and bounds. Although she wasn't at Zhen Dijuan's level yet, she didn't need help anymore. She could decipher the complicated array formations on her own. Decipher it. I will protect you, Jun Changshao said. Yes. Shengguan Xingyao communicated with the formless array formation and started to infiltrate and deduce. Yi Xingchen sat on a huge rock at the side. He circulated the spirit vein constitution and absorbed the heaven and earth attributes that existed in this place. And, after a while, he opened his eyes and looked at the area where the wind and sand were howling. He saw a black figure gradually appear. He frowned and muttered, This person looks a little familiar. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.